Right.
Good evening, one and all. This is the regular meeting of the Flemington Borough Planning Board for March 14th, 2023. Meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, with adequate electronic notice of this meeting has been provided by way of publication in the Hunterdon County Democrat and Courier News newspapers on or about January 18th or 19th, 2023. In addition, notice of the meeting was posted on the door of the Borough of Flemington Municipal Building located here at 38 Park Avenue, and any handicap accessible entrance there too. Posted on the municipal website, provided to the municipal clerk, and distributed to all persons, if any, requesting copies of same. This meeting is being recorded with both audio and video and may be rebroadcast. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. I'll ask everyone, please rise as you're able to their flag salutes. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one nation
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our board secretary is remote. Eileen, though, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Carroll.
Here.
Mrs. Engelhardt. Mr. Campion,
Here.
Mr. Dashna. Is here. Mr. Levitt,
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Giffen,
Here.
Ms. Weitzman,
Here.
Mr. Hill,
Here.
Mr. Semino,
Here.
Mr. Eckel,
Here.
Mr. Weintraub.
Here.
Mr. Show,
Here.
Ms. Kaczynski,
Here.
Ms. McManus,
Here.
and Mr. Clerico and Mr. Troutman are excused.
Thank you all for coming for a packed meeting. Relatively straightforward agenda this evening. First item on the agenda, as always, is a period for public comments. Seeing as that there are no actual members of the public in the room present or online, without objection, we'll move to item 2 on the agenda, mayor's comments.
I have none.
Even
Better.
Even
Go ahead, say
quicker.
it. You can say it. It's okay.
council comments, Susan.
I just wanted to relay to the rest of the board that the 2 cannabis ordinances that were you guys reviewed last 2 weeks ago here were heard for final at the council meeting last night. Both did pass without any modifications to them, to what you saw. I think one of the things that being on this board for 15 years, I'm kind of seeing how the process is now from the other side. I'd really love it if when we send a resolution up to council, that each council member gets distributed a copy of that resolution, because I suspect over the 15 years, there's been many councilmen that have never actually read our resolutions and recommendations, no matter how mild or innate they are. Just a thought.
That would go to council, not through Eileen.
Yeah, so I don't know how we do that in the future, but I'd really like to see whatever resolution we issue from the planning board on any type of review of ordinance get distributed to the actual councilmen that have to vote on the ordinance. Because I don't think that's happened a lot in the last 15 years, which
So,
makes a lot of
so
sense.
can I just ask questions? So does that mean as an elected official, they don't see the documentation that comes from the planning board before it comes? That doesn't seem right.
The only thing we received was a copy, well, the only thing I received that I could have said was a copy of Eileen's minutes that were not approved. And I did forward them to the council president, and I said, do you think we should send this around? And he did not think it was necessary, especially since they were not approved. So that's it.
So I thought the resolution with the letter has to be sent to the governing body.
And I thought it was as well. If
Okay.
it's not, then that definitely needs to be.
Okay, so let's see, Eileen, if
Yeah, The two resolutions that were passed by the planning board were sent to the borough clerk.
But they're not distributed in the agenda to the council.
That's not on our,
Understand that,
Okay.
I'm just,
No, I understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to kind of just fix a communications problem, and I don't know how long it's been going on, but any, you know, we take a lot of time over the years to write those resolutions, and that's how we communicate with council. I'd like to make sure that all the council members get copies of that resolution so that they can consider those items.
So
when
Karen, let me ask a
voting.
logistic question. If we have those are public items, right? So they could go in the agenda pack. There's no reason why members of the public can't see it in the agenda pack, correct?
that is correct. However, the board has, when we review ordinances, and this has been a policy that we have established, we could certainly change it now going forward, whatever your take on it is, but typically, we like to expedite the return of the planning board's review of the ordinance back to council so they can take action. So what I'll do is I'll prepare a resolution that I then amend based upon the board's comments, the voting, etc. That is then sent to Eileen based upon, again, whatever the board discusses, and then that is what is signed and transmitted to the clerk. What happens after that? I mean, I don't know that that's
No,
appropriate for us to do more than that, but the alternative is to hold off on that resolution until the next agenda, at which point the resolution would be prepared based upon, just like we do applications. The resolution would be prepared based upon the board's commentary, and then that would ultimately be posted once it was adopted by the board.
I think the extra 2 weeks is not necessary if if on the borough clerk side, it gets circulated to the council members. Like, I don't know why, I mean, that shouldn't be a hard thing to do.
It could be just a disconnect by the
Yeah.
clerk.
I think
don't-
that's probably the case.
I think it's by the case.
I guess my question is, I know Jeff, you served on council before, and
Yeah, but we didn't have anything that came back.
well, that's what I'm saying,
But at
did you
that
ever
point-
see come back?
Only because there wasn't anything that required, in my brief 9 months. I was in between
Right.
redevelopment plan adoptions, I was in between. I don't remember specifically there being one, only because I don't think there was anything in that short window that came
Right.
through.
Like I said, this isn't something I'm suggesting that this board act on, but I want you all to know what my observation was, and that I am going to try to remedy the situation, whether this is a situation that's been going on for
I
years,
think so.
or whether it's just for yesterday's,
I think
I
it,
don't know.
honestly, I think it might have been yesterday, because last year, at the end of the year, they had the resolution on Cardinal, on the Agway site, that also had 3 inconsistencies noted. The council had that ordinance. They absolutely had it,
They had that
the rest of the
resolution.
discussion. So I think it was a disconnect the last week.
Okay, thanks.
That's good to know, okay.
I'll keep an eye on it.
But at
for the
a
future.
minimum, though, the council did know that one consistency did not pass.
I verbalized.
Okay, as long as they knew, that bare minimum.
Yeah.
It's different from 3 inconsistencies, 'cause I remember listing all those, but in general, and I think in the ordinance that you were talking about, it passed.
It did.
Yes.
Did pass.
But I'm just talking about the fact that they physically had it.
Yes.
They
Oh,
physically had it.
and like I said, the council doesn't have to follow our,
No, but they have to, on the record, put a reason why they voted one way or another based on what we noted. That has to be on the record.
so maybe that, I would suggest you take that back. I wouldn't want to put something in legal jeopardy of not being, I know we were under a time constraint for that.
It wasn't a time constraint, we acted when we needed to act.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's good. Anything else, Susan?
No.
Okay. HPC, Dennis, do you have anything?
We have our meeting tomorrow night. So I don't have anything other than save the date for the historic house tour, June 3rd, Saturday, 11 to 5. Spread the word.
You didn't even get a once tonight, all right.
Come on, go on.
No one's coming into my house, my side is.
You don't need, the lawn signs are just to
Yeah,
advertise.
lawn sign. I noticed the little lawn sign.
Who's got it? Who's got it, Dennis?
Let's talk. Give it up.
I don't put one in my corner.
Okay.
Let's see, you know,
I'm covered. Dennis has got it all. He's got the sound. All right, thanks. Item 5, approval of the minutes from our February 28th, 2023 regular meeting, which were distributed by email. Or can I get a motion and a second on the minutes?
Second, Cook.
Any discussion or clarification on the minutes?
Mayor Carroll,
Yes,
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Engelhardt,
Yes,
Mr. Campion,
Abstain.
Mr. Dashna. I can't hear him.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Mr. Levitt,
Yes.
Ms. Giffen,
yes,
Ms. Weitzman.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll talk into the microphone for Eileen.
That's much better.
I love us for keeping me honest. All right, item 6 on the agenda, chair items. First off, we have 2 subcommittees that are reporting out progress tonight, which is great. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time working on those. But before we get into those items, I just want to check in on our next meeting, which is March 14th. Eileen, do we have,
28.
why does it say March 14th? It's March 28th.
Yeah,
Today, thank you, sorry,
It was a new one.
March 28th,
yeah, I corrected that when the one that's
appreciate that.
posted.
sorry.
We do have the public hearing for the BSD Flemington Apartments, formerly known as Spice Factory.
Okay, is that a Board of Adjustment matter, or is it just plan boarding?
That's Board of Adjustment.
So, okay, so we want to make sure we've got it. Everyone, is there anybody who knows that they will not be here on the 28th?
I am not here on the 20th.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, good.
Possibly me, Jeff.
Okay. All right, so other than that, though, I think that if there's only 2, then we'll have more than enough folks to make sure we've
That
got,
would be great, with the mayor, Susan and Todd.
and Mike. Yeah, but it's
Possibly.
right, but you only need it's
will be
Board of
7.
Adjustment, so it's
Yep.
7.
So 7 people.
We
Yeah,
definitely.
Definitely, yeah. No, I'm just saying.
We're good. I want to make sure we don't have a problem. Okay, good. Eileen, is there anything else that's coming down that you know of?
No, not at the present time. There's been a few inquiries, but nothing's been submitted. As you know, some have asked for the to be a place holding on the agenda, but we don't have any applications at this point, and that's not possible.
Okay, so we don't have anything else that's firm. Couple of other logistical things I just want to, before we get into the subcommittee reports. Eileen got an email from a University of Delaware undergraduate student who wants to talk to somebody on a 15-minute interview about what it's like to be on a planning board. And of course, I'm happy to talk to any student, but I can't keep it to 15 minutes. So she's got a very narrow window. My guess is the assignment is due on Thursday. And I'm just reading between the email lines because I've done this for 20 years. My guess, she has an email there with availability tomorrow and on Thursday of some times. If there's anybody who would like to speak to an undergraduate student from the University of Delaware's public policy program. Anybody interested? Trent's volunteering. All right, Trent, you will. So that you saw the email, feel free to reach out to,
Oh, that's tomorrow.
that is tomorrow or Thursday.
Oh,
You got it? All right. Thank you. And that was the only other correspondence that I saw that required any discussion.
are we gonna, do you have to vote on this or discuss this?
That's gonna be part of the
Okay.
bylaws, citizen input
Very good.
conversation, yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm gonna start with bylaws and rules on citizen input. So Kara, if you could start.
Well, so what we have in front of us is the compilation of comments that the subcommittee established. Some are questions, And basically it's just provided in there for discussion by the board. Any other questions we may have, I also put some in there myself just for purposes of clarification. There were a few errors we needed to correct. But however we want to go through it, we want to just go to each section that has a change, we can discuss that. If there's any particular section that anyone wants to focus on, if they've had a chance to take a look at it.
I think maybe we just go in order is probably better.
Yep.
Even if it's a minor change, we can go through it quickly.
Yep.
And then just process here, this is all for discussion tonight. The subcommittee is gonna then go back, listen to what we talked about, and then come back with a final version for adoption. And for those who haven't read all of the bylaws, because you may not have, the very last page requires that not only the bylaws have to be amended by a 2/3 majority of full members of the board. That's on the last page there, as well as that it has to be presented in writing to each member at a regular or special meeting or preceding the meeting in which the vote is taken.
Are full members, the voting members or the alternates too?
9 full members of the board. Sorry, I should read that. 9 full members of the board. So what's gonna happen is whenever they're done fixing it up, it'll be presented at a meeting, and then the meeting after that, we would have a vote to adopt. I know it sounds,
And 6 have to vote for it.
and 2/3 of 9 would be 6, yes. Just so everybody knows. So Kara, please take it away.
Okay, so if for the first change we have here is under section 3 membership, and the first is really just an error. That we've clarified, this may have been a result of a change in legislation of the borough, but we now have 4 alternate members, not 2, so that change was made. The next changes here were really to clarify some questions that came up with regard to the voting of the alternates. So what this is intended to do is to clarify how the voting is done on particular matters. So when the board is functioning as a planning board, there are 9 members, and there are 9 members that are permitted to vote. Both when the board is functioning as a zoning board and a planning board, alternates are permitted to participate to the extent that there is no conflict or required recusal. But when we're functioning as a planning board, it's 9 voting members. And when we're functioning as a zoning board, it's 7 voting members. And the alternates are again permitted to participate, as it says in the statute, in dialogue, in discussion, in questions, but may only participate and may only vote, let's use 2 different words, when necessary to achieve that number that's required, be it planning board of 9, zoning board of 7. So that's what this was intended to clarify and clear up, because there was some confusion and we wanted to put some language in there.
Before we move forward, is there any question or discussion on that membership section? Okay.
Next is the description of the types of members of the board, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. And the questions here really center around this language concerning when a member that is also a member of the Environmental Commission is a class 2 versus a class 4. And the subcommittee members had questions as to what exactly that means. The first thing I want to say is this is taken directly from statute. We can certainly reference the statute in there, which I don't think is there, but for purposes of clarification. It is.
It is.
No, that's not it.
Yeah,
It's
class
4055D-23.
Which is referenced right above the membership section.
Yes, correct. So there is one change though, when I was comparing it with the statute, if we look at the very last line of the first page, where it says members of the planning board, both a member of the zoning board or historic preservation commission, and a member of the board of ed. So it's very confusing. If you read it word for word, and Beth, please feel free to throw some information in here as well, but it is very confusing. If we look at the class 2, your member that is a environmental commission member that is also a planning board member will be a class 4 unless you have both a member of the Board of Adjustment and a member of the Board of Ed as class 4 regular alternate members. Here, we don't have a zoning board. And we have a planning board that functions as both a planning board and a zoning board. We have a joint board. So for as long as you have one board, that's never going to be an issue because you're never going to have both a zoning board member and a Board of Education member on this board. Okay, however, if we then move to the class 4 section in that description, this talks about in the case of a 9-member board, one class 4 member may be a member, if there is an environmental commission, the member of the environmental commission, who is also a member of the planning board, which we have, shall be class 4 unless there be among the class 4 all alternates, both a member of the zoning board or historic preservation commission and a member of the Board of Ed, in which case the member common to the planning board environmental commission becomes a class 2.
This
So-
doesn't say zoning board here.
I said that was the change. I needed to.
Oh, we just add zoning
Yep,
board
yep,
there.
yep.
But if you, now, this came up before, and thanks for trying to explain it, I still don't understand it.
It's, again, whatever light you can give to it.
Here's what I don't understand in the class 2 is, and one of my questions to you was, if these requirements are achieved, if somebody is on the 7-member of the zoning board and also a member of the Board of Ed, they are deemed a class 2 planning board member. My question was, does that then mean we don't have someone like Michael Campion as the planning zone 2? Can we have 2 class 2s? Ones that's deemed from this wording and
So I'm gonna stop you because this paragraph, as long as we have one joint board, will never apply.
so then why do we leave it in?
Because we might in the future.
And you might in the future.
Can you put in
Okay.
clarification language about bylaws that explain what we can have? Or what we do and get, so that it just,
There's so
Clarify
many
it.
different options there. What I can, you can maybe just, I could put an asterisk and I can say, as long as there is a joint board, there will never be a Board of Adjustment member that is also on the planning board, because you will
Yeah.
not have a planning board and a zoning board.
That
You
will
will have one.
clarify it, because
That I
then
can do.
when we then don't have
You
that.
agree?
then
That
that's
would
straight.
Lawyers vote.
So then, does that though still transfer over to the part where we're discussing the class 4?
right, Dennis was a full voting member, not an alternate, and he's on the HPC, what does that mean for Mike Campion?
Nothing, because we don't have a school board member.
Correct,
So we have to have
But if
both.
we did,
correct.
If we did.
so if, that's what I'm trying to. work
So if
out.
they would, then they would automatically by statute become your class 2 member,
And then.
Both of them would,
correct?
so we'd end up, so if
No,
I
you
appointed,
can't have to.
but wait, if I appointed.
You can't, exactly.
So you can't, so if it comes time for appointments, and there's a Board of Ed member on a class 4 unexpired, and there is an HPC member on a
Correct.
class 4 unexpired, you are not, there is no class 2 vacancy to then appoint.
So everybody's 4s. There's no 2s?
One of them.
One of the 2 doesn't get 2,
Yes.
which is the 1 year, and one of them gets the 4 year.
Okay.
2s are always 1 year.
Yes,
Yes.
So Dennis could be the 1 year and Trent would be the 4, like, so that would have to, so they would be designated by, if they happen to happen concurrently. The then mayor would have to appoint the HPC person and say, you're gonna be the class 2, even though you're HPC, you're class 2 for a 1-year appointment.
yes, provided that you've got the HPC and so it's either be a member of the zoning board, again, which we're just gonna take out for purposes of this discussion, I'll put the asterisk again. But they would be HPC and a member of the Board of Ed.
So Dennis could be a full voting board member and Mike Campion is still the class 2.
Right now, we're.
Right, but I mean.
Right. But the thing is, if somebody on here, one of the class 4s, became a member of the Board of Ed also.
Yes,
So
Yes.
run with me,
yes,
somebody becomes on the Board of Ed, we have.
Except he's not a full voting member, Dennis is not a full voting member.
no, but it's,
Okay.
Say, Board of Ed.
Yep.
Then he becomes a class 2,
but
we don't need Michael, but the thing is, then we don't have 9.
But it doesn't make-
We're a single joint board.
it's not, the alternates are included in there.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
So, okay,
But as long as we have a single joint board,
This can never.
none of this matters.
So we
No,
have the
no,
same,
no,
no, this one.
no.
can happen.
The
This
second
one-
class 4 one does because it's zoning board or HPC.
Or HPC.
Yes.
I thought it was PennDOT.
But I still don't know how.
And that's because I made that change. You're not looking at that change. So if we look at the very last line of page 1,
Yeah,
it should say. Members of the planning board, both a member of the zoning board or historic preservation. And a member of the board of ed.
The same person has to be both.
No,
Oh,
so what you're saying is, okay, so let's say, right now, if this board's as it is right now.
correct,
Okay, and Karen decides to run for school board and win,
yes,
okay? Whatever school board it is, she wins,
yep,
and she's a continuing member of this class 4 member of this board.
yep,
Start, as soon as her term is up, we now have a class 4 member on the Board of Ed.
yep,
A member of the Environmental Commission as a class 4 member, and as soon as she's sworn in on the Board of Ed.
Not the environmental commission, it's the HPC member.
The
HPC.
It's the
but
No,
it's the environmental commission that becomes the class.
so it becomes the class 2.
So the environmental commission member goes.
No, it says here, it says in here, which case the member common to the planning board of the Environmental Commission shall be
Yeah.
deemed a class 2 member.
Two.
So that
Yes.
becomes a 1-year member.
So if you have. You have the HPC member,
Yeah,
you have
A
a
Board
board
of
of
Ed-
education member.
and an Environmental Commission.
And the environmental commission member,
Yeah.
that environmental commission member at that time automatically becomes your class 2.
Okay, and if someone was appointed to fill a vacancy on the Board of Ed, not winning
Oh, no.
election. Asking.
The technical legal term.
That's yes, New Jersey. If that were to happen, let's say, sorry to pick on Karen.
no,
Karen was
sorry.
appointed to fill a vacancy, right? We're appointed to fill a vacancy on the moment that she's sworn in, we've now created this scenario, and then Trent, who's on the Environmental Commission. Would then would be designated the class 2,
You kick out.
and Mike
class
can be-
two.
The second year of your term, you automatically, that second year becomes a 1-year term.
and he's out. after that,
Automatically.
and he doesn't go
And
back.
his 4-year term, so wait, so. That's champion,
Well, that's really the question.
That is the question.
That's the question, because he's only appointed for a year.
right?
He would continue to,
Go for
he
a
would
year.
move because he continues to have. The tenure, but would automatically then become a 1-year.
And then after the 1 year, if the situation were to change, would that designated
No.
class 2 environmental commissioner revert back to their class 4 status?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would say no, because once you're changing your classification.
And.
But I don't know, these are all very good questions.
I love having, you know, somebody from the HPC on the planning board,
Yes.
the environmental commission's law. And so we just all have to take picking spurs that nobody's gonna let Karen run for school board. Well, good, because it makes a mess of everything, because having Mike Campion on is also a benefit, because he's the DPW.
Exactly. That's
Right.
part of my second part of the question is if we have to let then Mike Campion's position
He can't
go,
be appointed to anything else either.
then we don't have somebody who's an employee and that has benefits to us.
Absolutely.
And also, doing the math, don't we only make if somebody.
No, because an alternate would slide up.
These
And then
are
no
no
alternate.
duty.
No, so right, Mike
But
Campion
then
would
we
leave,
can also-
Trent would go into his
But then you
spot.
would have an opening for an
There would
alternate.
be an opening for an alternate. Well, actually, no, not necessarily, now the mayor.
Well, because he's a class 2 member, his class 4 member.
Yes.
disappeared. So then you replace him.
Correct.
The
Theoretically.
person who slid into class 2 creates an opening for a class 4. We
Correct.
bring one from.
Is it or is it a mayor's appointment, because it's a vacancy now?
Class 4 is in there.
Still a fair
But,
question.
Yeah.
Not a favourite question, and apologies for the small questions on this. What is the benefit of this? Why would this brought in? Why would?
It's a
and
statutory requirement.
It's
none of us like this.
standard.
You're trying to understand.
Yeah, you're trying to.
This, and why?
Because I think the rationale once upon a time was to avoid having all of these quote unquote inside people. You've got an environmental commissioner, a board of ed person, an
HPC.
HPC.
Now all of a
all
sudden
of
there's
these-
too
And
many.
it's.
And an employee,
And it's like, you got all of these kind of inside people without as much voice from the
right, so
public.
you wanna get rid of.
outside.
Can't
I
have
can see what
four, you
legislative
want
history I
three,
get.
get rid of you.
That would be another thing.
So just to a side note,
Yeah, I'll look to see if she could find something.
Yeah.
it doesn't, I don't see why we would get rid of the municipal. That's what
We don't agree with you. It's not, this is.
I'm not trying to get rid of Mike. We
Yeah,
don't
we-
want to.
But we have
School board.
He's gonna retire from teaching, he's gonna run for school board.
Oh my God.
So this tends not to punish a person unless you're the person being replaced. This tends to, not punish is the wrong word. This tends to put a governor on the board to say, listen, board, you gotta look at your volume, you can't have
The same people do.
this, that, and this, you just can't do it.
Right, I think it's about having 4 insiders, they want 3 insiders.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
right now we have 3 insiders, we have the environmental commission, we have the HPC, and we have the employee. If somebody became a school board member, it becomes 4 insiders.
And the other piece that for us is really complicated, and this is New Jersey, is that the school board is not coterminous with the borough,
Right.
because we're joint K-8 and a joint high school district. And
Well, it
so,
would be either, couldn't it be FRSD board?
that's what I'm saying, it's either either board, so like, it's, yeah.
Mhm.
Look, so if nothing else, we should never go back to having 2 boards, because
That takes care of one of them.
I think it's one of the problems, and no one can run for school. board.
Then that takes care of
Nobody
them.
wants to speak, but that's the other.
So we need a second form,
Yeah,
there,
I
that says,
promise.
Yeah.
everybody signs, if they're not running for school board.
All right, so I,
Pass that around the beginning of the year.
all right, we've got other stuff in here, we're on page 1, so let's.
So we're gonna add the class, yes, must be helpful, great.
For the second part, but I'll put that in there as well.
Okay, there's another red line on page 2.
That's the same thing as the issue that we just talked about. We just lumped class 2 and class 4 together. We had both the conversations.
Okay,
The other one further down, no, also, again, this was to clarify.
Jim,
Spam Nayavite, I knew who that is.
okay,
Spam not available.
I'm gonna mute Jim, it's okay, I got it.
The next one talks about no alternate member shall be eligible to serve or be nominated as chair or vice chair. Again, that's just clarification. If you can't serve, you can't be nominated. The next one, there was a question as to whether or not we should reference the Article 5, sections 25 and 28 here as well, which just kind of reiterate this same issue that we're kind of talking about. I have no problem doing that. Just belt and suspenders.
And Cara, that was just for, I think that was for everyone to know, that's clarifying when we get further back, let's see.
Yep.
That's clarifying, there's the situation where we say that full members can sign off that they watch the meeting and then take part, but then we also have a regulation in there about when alternates come in for a person who's missing. So my question to Cara was, we need some clarification of what if an alternate member sat in on the discussions, but then the full member wants to come in? It was just trying to clarify what, it wasn't really clear in the wording before.
Yep, so that we can cross-reference there, but the reality of it is the voting members outside the alternates get preference. So even though you have alternates, because again, those alternates are allowed to participate throughout every single meeting and hearing, regardless of whether they can ultimately vote at the end. So if you have regular members that have done what they need to do, listen to the tapes, sign the certifications, they do, unfortunately, even if they didn't participate in as many as the alternates did, they get the priority of voting. So I can look at all of those sections and make sure that it's clear and cross-reference them and take away any confusion. Section 5, this is something that we haven't done. And I do it in other boards and it would be helpful only for the purposes of, we do have the section that talks about removal for excessive absences. So technically, if we're going to deem somebody absent, I think it would be helpful for the board to say we're going to vote to accept the absentee of X particular board member. We can keep track of it, and then if the board has any questions with regard to why or anything along those lines, that's something that we can.
You're saying that the board should vote to say that,
To formally excuse them from the
Excuse
meeting,
from the meeting.
correct?
So that doesn't count as an absence.
It's
Oh, no,
it's
excuse
not
me.
an
It's like an
unexcused, yeah,
excused absence.
exactly.
So if somebody gets COVID and they miss 3 meetings in a row and everybody knows it,
That they have COVID, exactly.
it's
That's an
excused, or if somebody has a
excused
death in their family.
Correct.
and they're
Or if somebody just doesn't show up, and we don't know about it.
That's
Now,
different. That's
Eileen
another-
technically does that, because she'll say, ask to be excused or whatever.
I was gonna say, so it's not sufficient for the board secretary to, or chair to keep track of that? You'd rather see a vote is fine, I was just asking.
It just clears up any issue, like I said, we're doing it with other boards, so.
But if somebody just doesn't show up and doesn't call.
Correct, that's, yeah, when everyone's like, oh, you're gonna text them, are they coming, what's going on?
Right.
You guys haven't had this issue, but I've seen a lot of boards around the state where members just don't show.
Hmm.
And it's an issue. I had an application in a town I won't name where I literally couldn't get a quorum for more than 6 months on an application.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Isn't that a? Yeah.
Whole other set of issues
Yeah.
for that community. So I'm not saying you guys really need to protect yourselves against that scenario, but there are lesser scenarios where it's like, oh, is so-and-so coming? Oh, who knows? They only show up once a year. I've heard that in the beginning of other board meetings. And so it might be nice for you guys if you do have a problematic board member, just to be able to say, well, they missed 7 meetings and they were only excused twice.
Really does it, and we like that. Can we just almost semi-formalize when she says, can we almost just do a.
We can do an aye vote,
Just an
yeah,
aye
yeah.
vote, and say, so would we agree, yeah,
Yep,
aye,
no problem.
and just move on. rather
Do it,
than-
and do it at the, and do it at the top of the agenda. with
Just
the following-
When she says it, and then
Yeah.
say that we're not okay with that, we all go aye, and that's good, and then if we have a question, that's some time.
So Jim just put his dog on his lap because Hannah's got the sign on her lap.
But is that a real dog?
That was, yes, he said Pomeranians. Yes.
But it was very
Very
dog-like.
fluffy.
Yes, Jim's dogs are dog like, have you not seen them? They're hysterical. Yes, moving right.
Horrible.
Right. All right, so that's section 5.
All right, so that's
By the
that.
way, we have had issues
Yeah.
before, not anything of malice, but we have had issues where in years past where this option was considered, like, should we consider this? We didn't end up taking action, but it was considered, so it's something that, it's not something that we haven't
Dealt
come
with.
across before.
I remember.
You don't know why somebody would want to miss this? Yeah,
Absolutely.
There's brownies.
There's brownies that we have.
And there's Zoom now.
Yeah.
Well, that is a good option, yeah.
It's helpful.
That's good, like, right.
I suppose to have to pay for a
Call
baby.
From a paper.
I don't know how many babysitters I paid for in 15 years, but I would have liked to have had Zoom.
Seriously.
And there
The
was
phone was always an option. We just never really used it. Your council used it more than we ever did.
It's so awkward trying to do it over phone,
Yeah.
especially for a planning board meeting. where you
Yeah,
have to
it's hard for
put
planning.
things on exhibits.
All right, Article 2, officers' duties.
All right, so if we look at this, technically, the MLUL allows for a secretary to be appointed that is a board member. That would be a situation where you do not have an actual secretary. We don't do it, we have an actual secretary, but that is why there's this change here. Again, something we can consider. And I just made a distinction between a secretary and what I'm calling an administrative secretary.
Can I ask, in other jurisdictions, maybe you would, either one of you know this, what job does a secretary elected from the board members do? Like, what's their role? It's just a title.
I've seen people take notes, but I don't think that they're actually creating the meeting minutes.
No.
I'm not quite sure.
we had.
And I think it's more when you have a town that doesn't have an MLUL.
Yeah, small towns, very small town.
We are a very small firm.
Yeah, but you guys have more.
Not by what you do here, that's for sure.
But you have more administrative, like infrastructure.
Yeah.
Than in some other, like think rural towns where there's just almost literally nobody. There's like one person in the municipal building during the day.
Okay.
But I'm still not quite sure what narrative role they play.
Yeah, other than that.
Honestly.
I know that we, in executive session in the past, when we were discussing personnel, we
That's a
had,
good idea.
we had we
Yeah,
used
that's
this
a good idea.
option.
Okay.
I'm sure of it. However, I also remember my council training from last month clearly stated that never, never, never should an elected official do this. So, so I think, and
Do what, take minutes or?
take minutes during the meeting.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I think I probably, I don't know if Todd and Jeff both remember, but it was the mayor at the time, and I knew it was 3 mayors ago. That was the one that actually took the minutes during our, it was, you know, innocent. It was our yearly professionals meeting, so it was no big deal. But it was 3 mayors ago, they took meeting minutes in our executive committee at that session. And we were joking about it. It was Phil.
So it was 2 mayors ago.
2 mayors ago, sorry. No, one, two,
Three.
three. I was counting. on
Yeah.
I was
3
counting
mayors.
on-
Go, Mayor, she's.
The point is, I recall, we were joking about it because Phil happens to be the secretary of the county planning board. So he goes, yeah, I'll do it. So that's why we had him take notes during, but I do remember last month, elected officials can't do it.
Don't look
But
at me, I don't ever wanna do it.
Yeah, but
Ever.
it was just, like I said, it was just.
So we don't have to, so we could elect this, you wrote it as a may,
Yes, correct.
and this is because the MLUL allows for it to
Correct.
happen, and so you want to include it because it is allowed for in the
Correct.
ordinance, and we can decide whether or not we want to do it. or not.
I always thought in an executive session, if you do not have a secretary, the lawyer is the one who does this sort of thing.
That's what I'm saying, because I don't want to.
April is good.
But sometimes you're talking about, you have to talk about the lawyer in the.
Yeah,
executive
exactly.
session. So there is a scenario where that could happen.
I said, I don't pose is really
Because
good.
those lawyers there,
Very
you know,
dangerous in our-
talk about Tara all the time.
That's all right, I'm used to it.
Okay, so this is really just allowing for
Yes,
something that we may, as a board, at our reorg meetings, decide to do or to not do.
yes.
Okay,
And then that last sentence, again, just trying to make it perfectly clear how many members are able to vote.
And we don't have a definition per se from the law that would say what a secretary is and what role they play.
Yeah.
I mean, because if it's.
And to include it in here, is that where you're?
No,
going?
just, I mean, because if there's a reason why it's, you know, a lot of these, if not all of them, were lifted from either the law or other municipalities to say that you can, you know, I'm not
This is
certain.
the statute.
So if it's a statute and you have, I mean, I'm not sure a volunteer can do what Eileen does. So then you think like, if that can't happen.
yeah, but our bylaws are very clear. The board shall also appoint, engage in services of an administrative secretary who shall not be a member of the board. So what we're saying here is you can elect a board member secretary and
Right.
you may elect a board member secretary, but you will.
I just didn't know if there was a definition of that may in there. I mean, I could see it in my head, somebody that would be, you know, a partner to Eileen and making sure, you know, the things that the chair usually does.
Well, listen, I can tell you that I've had 2 boards. 2 times in the years I've represented boards where I've been the board secretary because someone has left or. You know, they need to be replaced, and I've done it. Everything myself for 4 or 5 months. And it's a nightmare, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, so. Was there a summary of the duties? No, because it changes from town to town. And I certainly would not have been able to do it here, but I was able to do it for some other towns where the job was not as onerous and you didn't have the, you know, it wasn't as busy as you are here.
Remember that the dude that wrote that section, not defining secretary, is also the dude that wrote the section with all the membership.
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
so.
Yep, very good point.
To your volunteer point, though, so I volunteer boards, the Environmental Commission and the HPC, they write their own minutes and make their own minutes, so volunteers can do that. It's just, I know on this level, with the amount of work that private we do, I know.
Oh, that's what I mean. It's more than minutes.
I'm also concerned that the minutes from this board are utilized in litigation and proceedings as evidentiary, and once you get past. You know, and as we all know, that when something gets litigated from a planning board matter, the record of those minutes are really, really substantially considered by whoever's adjudicating the case. We want to make sure it's done objectively and professionally.
And remember, I mean, we all review the minutes, everybody has comments, and at the end of the day, you have a verbatim recording. Also, not undermining anything, but it's important. I don't think it's something you ever want to do, and in fact, if we just want to reference the statutory reference in here and leave everything the way it was, that's fine too. I'm not, trying to create.
Put it in, I mean, putting it in is not a problem because it's a mail act, that's fine.
Can I just say, I like the idea, I like the fact that the mayor said that it was a dude that did this.
Well, back in the
I
day,
saw it was a dude.
there was smoking cigarettes and they were all,
You know it was a dude.
they were all, yes.
Just the dude. That's like, gentlemen, all the gentlemen in this room are.
I'm,
Sorry,
no
Well,
apologies there.
they were not
Well,
enlightened like the gentleman in this room.
Exactly.
And on the screen.
Say we. Still have some work to do, so,
Next
question is.
voting mechanisms. So that was something else that was discussed. Now, Robert's rules does allow for different types of voting mechanisms, including a ballot vote. I
See ballot.
Yeah.
Towns vote with ballots.
allowed to.
We used to over in township when I was in the American Budget Planning Board. We did, Yeah. we did, back when I was
For
for application.
applications?
No,
no,
I'm sorry.
We're talking about regional law.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Sorry. We weren't in the election of officers
You're right, you're
section. Right?
And Karen, if I could just add why I added this in. So it didn't really, Robert's rules allows for lots of options. And it
Yes.
also says you can do whatever you want to do, basically.
Correct.
That's very, it can say you can do what is normally done. And as a, not so much a ballot with a piece of paper necessarily, but I think the ballot.
It is, that's allowed.
It can be, but when the way I read it was that a ballot is a slightly different way than a roll call, and it's specific, Robert's rules, to my reading, specifically said the way we did it is not the way to do it in contentious elections. So for instance, our bylaws have covered us perfectly. Normally, there hasn't been multiple nominations. Normally, we have one nomination, which apparently in Robert's rules also, it just says we don't even need to vote, because as long as there's only one nomination, they're deemed to be the only nomination.
Well, and I don't necessarily, I would never recommend that,
And I've
because just
given so
because
many
there is,
options.
someone could abstain.
Right, but I'm just saying that Robert's rules allows for so many different options. The ballot aspect of it is more allowing for, if we have multiple nominations, all the votes can take place. You don't have to just stop, you don't stop it when one reaches majority, you can test all of them and see if all of them reach majority. And then see what you want to do as a group.
And
You
that
know
I
what I'm
think
saying?
is the issue, so I
Yeah.
have no problem picking any one of these ways or coming up with our own, again, we're allowed to, but. I'll throw in the pros and cons here, taking that route. What happens when you have the exact same vote for two people?
It
Or
wouldn't
three
be because
people,
you've got 9.
or
people.
four,
You've
or
got 9.
We've got 9.
but
so
what I'm
it's-
saying is, if there are two nominations for
Someone abstained.
for chair.
Right,
I'm just saying, two nominated. The mindset is you go with the first person that was nominated and you vote. And if that person is going to win the vote or not win the vote, it wouldn't change regardless of when the vote took place. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but if the majority of the people on the board wanted nomination number 2, then they wouldn't vote for nomination number 1. But if they voted for nomination number 1, then they wouldn't have voted for nomination number 2. So if we go ahead with both votes,
okay, so, but
That's
this,
if the-
I understand.
understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but that works with 2, but not 3.
Mhm.
Why couldn't everybody vote exactly the same for all?
Because
three?
here's the thing, let's say I've got Abel Baker and Charlie, I'm making up names here, just ABC, easier, okay? All right, and we have 9 members voting for chair, Abel Baker and Charlie, and I like Abel, and I'll deal with Baker, and I can't stand Charlie.
Yep.
Okay, depending on the order in which they are called, my vote will change, yay or nay, because of my preference for a strong preference for one, a weak preference for another, and a negative on the third. If the third person is called first, I'll vote yes, but if my weak preference is called second, I may not want to vote no, because I'd rather have that person in rather than somebody else.
So are you saying that your vote would change based on everyone else that you heard?
No, my vote would change based on the order in which they were cast if there's more than two.
So if Baker is called first, are you voting for Baker?
Let's put it this way, if my preferences are in 1, 2, 3, A, then B, then C, in
Right.
strict order, okay?
And B is called first.
And B is called first, I really want to vote for A, but I'm afraid I can't take the risk of Charlie getting it. I may vote for my second preferred candidate.
But you need to know
Makes
what the
The
order
order.
is,
The
exactly,
order.
you need the order then at that.
Right, but the way that you did it last time was, we didn't hear all the nominations.
Right.
We heard one nomination, we voted, we heard
No.
another nomination, we
No,
voted.
no, we asked for a nomination and a second. We voted on the nominations in the order that they
They
were
were
received.
received.
Different story.
We vote on the second nomination.
With the
because of what-
mindset that
So-
it was passed and voted by a majority, so
But,
the second would not have had the majority.
but that system also then gives the preference to the person who gets the nomination first by yelling,
Yes,
which is not very professional in that was the bit I was trying to
That,
get away
that
from.
I understand, that is,
yeah.
that is correct.
Preference to the chair to nominate somebody or the mayor, we choose a preference order, or we don't just yell out.
So
and
why,
we
so
have them come
why
up
can't
and all
we
vote
do
with
a
them.
secret ballot vote?
I
If it's multiple.
I am fine with a secret ballot
I
vote.
said, like, is that why that's not being discussed?
Nominations would have to be in on a different meeting.
No,
Oh,
Nominations are made, of whoever in whatever order,
Right.
and you hear all of the nominations, and you vote for
And
one,
everybody's got the same color pink paper that's
And you-
exactly alike.
and you
just
write,
it
you
in,
write
like,
what the name of the
and
person.
Dean gets the ballots and she counts them, so
The
nobody
attorney
says
gets the
again,
ballot.
or the attorney, whoever.
And in that vote, could you vote for multiple?
No, we can't do rank, we don't do rank.
No, you vote
You
for
vote for one,
person.
One.
and we
If
see
there's
what
four
happens.
nominees, you vote for one.
The top of course, there's a tie,
Yes.
Right, there has to be, could you do, you know,
top two runoff.
Top two
there's
runoff.
five.
If there's multiple, more
But
than
then, like you
two,
said,
yeah,
there would be a
right.
tie with 9, there shouldn't be a tie.
it should be.
Because
If
if
there's-
you're abstaining, abstentions counts.
Can I,
towards the
so
majority number.
if one of the full voting members is absent for the reorg, alternate number 1 gets to vote for the reorg, right? Okay, so there should never be a tie.
Should never be a tie.
There should never be a tie.
If honest, if we
Unless
have,
they-
When
Yeah.
when 2 people
Well,
are
then-
nominated, if 3 people are nominated, it could go 3, 3, and 3.
but then on the second round, but if it's 3, 3, 3, then how do you do that?
You do it again.
We do it,
Just do it
well,
again, so-
You make people make speeches. Why
Oh.
I want to be chair? The same person who doesn't wins.
It's
I
a
don't-
competition.
By the way, Don is sitting over there going, I miss HPC.
How funny is this?
I'm
So-
just taking it all in.
That's good. So
What's the likelihood of
Very
having?
little.
it's very low.
I think it's come up now to the point where we're having this discussion, so I think we should figure it out. I mean, that's my two
It's not bad to have a bet, like like you had said, you're gonna come out with the same results.
I think so, but you know, with his permutations, who knows?
I'm sorry,
He
this
come up
is-
with
this is
something
my
entirely
My brain
different.
works like this, I think of.
The only thing that I could see would be, from a secret ballot perspective, is somebody could vote their conscience without feeling
Yeah,
coerced.
yeah.
I mean, that's always the positive aspect,
Right.
or negative as the case may be.
It's
but-
private
that
ballot.
Right.
Cara, are we allowed to do that kind of ballot when we're doing votes for applications?
No.
That has to be on the record, that has to be.
No,
Read out, but- The only reason I bring up
We're
the
not going
question, I'm just asking, and I'm saying why, is because when you're the last person on a vote and it's the tied vote, you know your vote makes the difference. And that can be a lot of pressure depending what order it came in.
And shouldn't be
So
on
I
the
was
board.
just.
Yeah, honestly, I
Yeah.
agree.
There shouldn't be on the board.
I
You can't
never
deal with
looked into what you can do that, but
Right.
I would have to say. No.
Okay.
No, I hear it.
Had a couple of votes where the last person is the tie, and that must be such, whether they were, the
Yeah.
pressure on them, that's all I was thinking, if you inadvertently become that last, unless we have the chair be the last one, and then he's got the chutzpah to.
I mean,
Make me the last person.
I'll be first, last, or indifferent, I don't care, I mean, I'm gonna vote, but
Right.
You've been here long enough, you've been last a couple times.
We've all been this way.
We've all been there.
You can't regret any vote you make.
I mean, I think there have been times where folks have voted. Let's put it this way, I know that there have been times where there have been a vote that you weren't quite sure about,
Mhm.
and you didn't want to be the one who made it not pass, but you wanted to express some sort of concern.
Right.
And if you saw that it had 5 already, you'd vote no.
We've
because-
seen that happen before.
Because you're like, well, my vote, I could signal
Right.
my displeasure without it affecting the application going forward.
Right.
That happens regularly, it happens once in a while.
No, it's,
Yeah,
and that's okay, it's expressing your displeasure.
anyway.
But that's not this,
Right.
that's not
Yeah,
this.
that's fine.
All right, so
So
are
they
we,
timed up 333 and say, just recap and do it again.
just do it again until there are one of
Right.
All right,
That was mostly, I thought it was a little unprofessional for us, it wasn't like, you know, the yelling out, and so, that was one of.
all
the
right,
things.
so maybe, so so if you could write it up, then what it sounds like, unless other folks have other thoughts, but
If there are multiple nominations.
We do a vote on each one.
all, you know, for chair, vice chair, and if the board decides to do a secretary, that it is, all nominations are made and seconded, vote by private ballot. And, if, in the event of
By private, just so I'm clear, by private ballot with one vote.
Or a simple majority.
Simple majority,
Rules.
right, and if no majority is reached on the first ballot, balloting will be repeated until.
It's so congressional of us.
I know, but like, this is what we're saying.
But you know what, it is possible somebody's gonna abstain.
Mhm.
It could be 4-4 with an abstention because somebody wants to choose.
It could
And
be.
what's, I'm just thinking this through now, so the goal, the recourse, if there's a tie, is just to keep voting? How
Yes,
many times?
as long as it takes.
Do we
Until
try-
somebody decides they're.
Have you not watched Congress?
Okay, exactly, yeah, are we seriously talking about like?
17 ballots.
4 AM? Yeah.
Yeah.
You can copy, we can caucus in between, we can have them call out for under 35 minutes.
CNN here.
Yeah, we can CNN.
We'll
we
read
can-
from the dictionary,
I can read recipes, it's fine.
I'll read Plato and Greek.
there you go.
There you go. I think, do we want?
No, but all seriously, aside, like that's, okay.
Or we say that the top 2 vote getters. Or, you know, the other option would be that the top 2 vote getters go on to the second ballot. And if there's not,
Mm.
Well, I think you're gonna have to provide for both,
right, so we
because
can-
you could have the top 2, or you could
Right,
continually
In
have.
the case of a tie, we could just add that in case
Yeah.
of a tie, which is, maybe we think it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. I doubt highly we're gonna have 3 people running evenly split, but you never know,
Agreed,
you never know.
I'd much rather have it spelled out than deal with it on the fly.
I was thinking Eileen put them into one of those big bingo things, she turns it, and whoever comes out the first, like you're like, and the new chair is.
No, I think we need, I think it should be like trivia.
Well, ask questions, who knows more, but yes.
Stop wanting
Who knows
to.
what-
Yeah. That's good. That could be good. Flemington history.
Flemington was true.
Real.
All right, Todd Fitzgerald said,
We haven't had.
all right. So can we, chairperson,
It's funny, because
we're on section 3, chairperson duties,
Sorry.
I believe we are.
Yes, that was just clarification, neither the chairperson nor the administrative secretary shall be an alternate board member,
Same thing with vice chair,
correct?
okay, and then acting chairperson. Okay, there's a section 5 here, I wanna ask this question because you guys, says no alternate board member shall be permitted to be acting chairperson. So,
no, we did that last year.
we had this.
Yeah.
This was in the, this was. in
But
the
we
language.
had no,
We had no choice.
No,
We had-
Karen was here.
No, there was one meeting.
you weren't here, is it the one I'm thinking
No,
of?
we knew she was gonna be traveling.
She was
Well,
in-
so Nobody called me to come and said if I could come in. and I would-
No, but we knew you were gonna be gone we knew already, like you had already established that you were gonna be gone. That
No,
next
this was,
meeting, no?
there was a meeting where Jim chaired
Mhm.
as an
And this is
alternate.
an add-on, mind you, so that's okay, we didn't run afoul of anything.
No, I'm not saying we did anything bad before, what I'm saying is if we put this here, and again, I am just saying. if we
Yeah,
have-
I see what you're saying.
If we have a scenario where it is a Board of Adjustment matter, so we lose the class 1 and 3 members. It is a area, it's an application that we have a number of conflicted members. The one that happened last year had 3 of us conflicted out.
Yep.
Okay, of class 4 members. And now we're left with,
A class 2 and a class 4.
well, you know, a class 2, a class 4 and alternates. And for some reason, you know, does it mean that the class, if we leave this in here, it means that the class 2 has to be the chairperson under that scenario? Because then you would still have quorum, but, and you can conduct business, but then the class 2 would end up having to be chair. And if do we want to do that, or do we want to give ourselves the ability to allow an alternate to be chair if necessary, having exhausted everybody else?
I mean, do you wanna say having exhausted everybody else?
Because
That
I
kind of
What
does
is
the same
exhausted
thing.
mean? Is exhausted is that my champion says, I don't want to chair, is that exhausted? So he could say that, Mike could say, I am not gonna chair this meeting.
I think that's what you guys have to decide, you know, if
Yeah,
you wanna give
because-
somebody the opportunity to say, you know, I'm just not the right person to chair this meeting.
And that's okay.
if we have, because the scenario would be 4 alternates and the class 2 member, having everyone else be conflicted out. Is 5 members, it's quorum to conduct business of a 9-member board. And the class 2 says, I don't want to chair, I mean,
If an alternate, if an alternate has the rights to vote.
Yeah.
Because they're now a voting member, they should have the right to chair.
that's
Yeah,
why
I
I'm
agree.
saying, this is, that's why I'm saying, I don't.
But it does say that no alternate member shall be eligible to serve as chair or vice chair. That's why I put
Make
that.
it acting.
But that's why it says acting,
Acting chair.
that's,
That's why it's acting.
Is there a different?
There is.
So is there a different?
So we could say, we don't have to put that in, again, that was an add-on, so no alternate member shall be permitted to be chair, we can keep it that way.
Right, which means that depends.
They're working nominated as chair or vice chair,
Right.
okay, however, can be acting.
right, so here we have here in section 5. In the absence or disqualification of all officers of the board, an acting chairperson shall be designated by the majority of the board present. Such, which would mean that in the scenario I laid out of 4 alternates plus the class 2, they're empowered to vote and participate as full members as alternates. They would then say, okay,
They could choose, or did they go in order of appointment?
It just
I mean,
says
could- the
it says
first
shall be-
5 of them
shall
could
be,
say,
it shall be designated. So it doesn't
so
have to
the
go,
5 of them could say, we want Dennis to do it.
it could.
popped in my head. So it's, last time is that, how do we define present? Because I was on the meeting on Zoom, but you were, Jim was in person, so Jim did it, right? So
Right.
like, if we say Zoom is present, then
I think
somebody.
being in
could be
person
on
is
Zoom.
important and it needs to
Definitely,
say,
but we didn't
in
have that, we
person.
don't have that language. When we're saying somebody present, we have to be in person, present only can act. Is the
but that would, you know.
But what if
wait,
we have a 4-no meeting though? And then we
Exactly.
can't do business, so I don't want to do that.
Well, I know.
And is that one of those things we just let shake out by the vote?
Yeah,
Because if it's one of those things that.
Yeah, all of our members live in the borough of Flemington, so if they say, we want Dennis to be the chair and Dennis is on Zoom, and we say, Dennis, can you get here in 5 minutes? And Dennis says, yeah, I mean, maybe Hannah can, because she doesn't have a babysitter, but maybe Dennis can, and he
Right.
comes in person and chairs the meeting.
I think that may shake out,
Yeah.
instead of regulating it here, that may shake out by the vote and what happens.
Yeah, because and we could say, you know, our preference, we don't have to put it down here, but that obviously having someone physically present, it could be preferred to having something on Zoom if the
Yeah.
majority of the
And
business.
there's no reason we can't ask them, because it's a 1 square mile town.
Yeah.
And
Alright, so we're taking out,
Just take out that last red
yep,
line.
okay,
And then did we always have the majority of the board present?
yes.
Well, because if we
Well,
don't have that. we
again,
don't want-
present-
No,
Present though, in this day and age, and we can clarify it, but in this day and age, present is here, like, we never would have even thought about changing that word 3 years ago.
no, I thought how this reads is the acting chairperson is designated by a majority of the board present. We've never had a vote to determine who's,
No, we've never voted, but the bylaws say that we should have been.
Exactly,
okay.
correct.
So we should add something in when that happens at the beginning of the meeting to say, do the people here vote, accept.
Or it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have, well, you or at the, or in the case that we're thinking about from last year, it was for a particular agenda item. Right, so like I gavelled in the meeting,
We needed to plan ahead.
of course you need to plan ahead, what I'm saying is like, what we should add to our process
It's
is
just a
that.
formal, the same thing
Formal
like
transfer.
the excused
I
absence.
see.
We're
So I
planning
would
ahead,
say-
we're doing it, and it's just a.
So I would say, I'm recusing myself from this matter, and the board needs to designate an acting chairperson. Somebody, you know, I mean, whether or not the recused chair could say, I nominate Brian Budney to, Brian's not here, I could say Brian Budney to do it. Or should I not participate in that process because of whatever, that's fine.
If
yeah.
if we're dealing with that type of situation where you're recusing yourself for a reason, no one that's in recusal situation should be doing it.
Right,
But we have to, the reason, I mean, we have to guarantee, we need to provide service to the applicant.
Yeah,
If the
I-
applicant is, you know, what I mean, like, that's our
And that can also be
priority.
done administratively.
But, and so planning ahead to say, okay, are we going to, just like Beth was saying, showing up and there not being enough people, that's not cool. Showing up and not having the right, you know, like that, like people that are eligible to be chair,
But
that's
that could
not
be done administratively as opposed to having more than a certain number of board members talk about it. That could be done
prior.
administratively.
Right.
We will plan ahead as you do normally, but it's just putting something quickly, having an item. and
So it's formalized.
Yeah, just added it in.
That's
Same
fine.
thing would have happened ahead. It was not gonna be decided at the last second. That person would wanna know.
we
ahead
would,
of time.
yeah, and we would wanna have it done ahead of time, and then, in fact, what I would say is.
Mhm.
As just practice under chair items that meeting ahead of, when we
Mhm.
have a known recusal situation where we need to have an acting chairperson. The board could act then,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be coterminous with the item, it could be,
Correct.
okay, in 2 weeks. I'm recused, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, we've
These are
done
the
that
folks,
before.
these are the folks who are gonna be here, we need to pick,
Right.
oh, okay, you all, whoever's gonna be here, can you vote affirmatively?
That could have been the
Tonight's
role
gonna
of the
be the chair.
secretary, by the way, chair, vice chair, secretary, and just have a lot.
Are
of
you not?
No,
I feel like he is.
No, it's just, because what you don't wanna happen, I don't think this will, what you don't wanna happen is what Susan has said is. Somebody can't make a meeting because they're stuck in traffic and they can't get here, and we're.
Which has
Right,
happened.
it didn't happen before, and we're going back and forth saying, no, I'm not gonna vote, abstain, sorry applicant, you've gotta go, because we can't all decide on who's gonna be chair. That never happened before, but I could see that happening. I could see it.
Mhm.
So you'd have to, as long as there's a way where if it's a majority vote, then it's fine, because if it's,
Which is the way it is right now.
that's fine.
Alright,
Because you could theoretically have 4% abstentions and 1 vote. and
It's
that's
gonna be, yeah,
it.
the majority of the
but even if they're not, alright, let's move on, board committees, we're only on page 4 of it, so,
I think as you get towards the end, it's not as bad.
that's good.
Remember how long it took Mark to do this, so, right.
Chairperson or acting chairperson, that's just typo, what's the discussion point?
If a temporary, I gotta remember, if a temporary committee is selected for a specific type of issue, I don't think just the chairperson should be making, okay, so this is, and I don't know that you're necessarily making the decisions as to who's on the committee. I think you look for volunteers,
Mhm.
right? Isn't that kind of how we do it at this point?
That's how we mostly, we've mostly done it, is we've. Except where the statute requires certain composition.
I mean, do we want to take a board vote on who's gonna be on the committee? I mean, I feel like sometimes we're kind of,
We
Asking for more
struggle to
people.
get people.
Yeah.
I also feel like it's,
Yeah,
it's the power of whoever's chairing to set some direction of who's serving. I mean, it's. One of the things that you vote for as chair is not only being able to be AV squad for Zoom, but also to
Yeah.
like who.
I think there needs to be an understanding that if anybody really wants to be on a committee or has, to be quite honest, an issue with somebody being on it, I mean, we
Yeah.
need to have a dialogue here.
Well, I mean,
And
I feel like I pushed my way onto the master plan ordinance committee.
I don't think you pushed your way on, but I did bring up that issue of, hey, shouldn't we give somebody else a chance? And you had an argument, why not? And I accepted that argument, and so we.
And we
moved
had a
on.
discussion.
Yeah, no, I don't think you, you didn't push yourself on. By any, I don't mean to push back at you, but we had a healthy discussion about it. And I think when Jeff called and says, hey, is somebody wanna volunteer for this subcommittee? Or he'll turn and go, hey, I'd like, so-and-so to do it, or I'd like so-and-so to consider doing it. There's a lot of times, at least in years past, I know that it's purposeful in that he wants to try to engage different people and give different people experience. So-
Let's move it away from personalities though, so let's
Okay.
talk about the chairperson of the board.
why don't we say?
But I mean, I think that's the chair's prerogative, is my point, is to say, hey, I want to get different people engaged.
Yes, but
and
the
I think
chair
that's
also-
chair's prerogative.
But the chair, without it being affirmed by the full board, and I'm not saying we should go this direction, but the argument on the other side is that the chair has the power to appoint the same three people to every subcommittee if they wanted to. As it's written right now, the chair has that power to do that. Now, I don't know if that's a necessarily good thing or bad thing. I'm just saying the way our bylaws are written right now, whoever is the chairperson of this board couldn't decide whoever they want to be on whatever subcommittees, and that's, or ad hoc committees. We tend to not work that way here, but it does exist.
What if I try and come up with some language that says, because I can't remember a time where there's really been an issue. To me, again, I think it's more along Todd's lines, come on, somebody, join. If there is an issue and we are gonna have a what do you usually have, 3?
We usually, so we have a subcommittee, it's usually 3, maybe 4, depending on the scope of what it is. And we have ad hoc would be like a technical review committee, we usually ask for volunteers for those, that's an ad hoc thing where we're asking.
How about the chair decides the number of people that are necessary, and if there's an issue, like if the mayor really wants to be on it and Trent really wants to be on it and we can't come to, then it goes to a board vote, something along those lines.
If you can
Maybe
find
I'm
language
making
that
too big
works.
of an issue about it, but it's.
Yeah, if you can find language that works, yeah, I mean, give it a shot.
I think the important point that you make, Cara, is that everyone speaks up.
Yeah.
To want to be on it and doesn't feel shy to like say, even if the chair already has 3 names and he asks for 3, really want to be on it, don't be shy to speak up, is basically, and then.
Well,
And
Hannah
it can
did
be
that
discussed.
consistently.
Trey was gonna say something. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the chair has the power to make a committee in the first place by themselves, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's not put up to a
No,
vote, just whether or not even exists, so their discretion.
Definitely.
So we're starting phone on.
I'm fine with, whatever chair, but I don't care.
I think as long as there's dialogue, and me being here, it sounds like everyone here is very open to dialogue and a conversation. That to me, I think is really important. So as long as we keep ourselves on the same page, we're all here to open up about. We're transparent about who we're selecting, and it's a dialogue for discussion that we can all hear. That to me is more than enough. So leave it to, in this case for Flemington, I can't speak on another town, leave it to the chair.
I agree.
It sounds okay in this context for this, town. So.
We're lucky that we have volunteers.
Yeah.
In years past, we literally had to kind of, come on, somebody else.
Well, yeah,
volunteer.
that's to your point, like, I think that,
we're all-
Jeff, you have.
we don't need that.
This is the thing, you gotta take Jeff out of
Take me out of
the
it. Don't make, give me.
It has to be anybody, so Jeff happens to be
Yeah.
a really good chairman.
Right.
You can end up with a not really good chairman.
You can have, I was just gonna say, you can have a bad egg that says, you know what, your bylaws say this, I'm going to.
You have to respect it.
Yeah, it's gotta be about the position, not the person, and not the experience with the current person, right? It's gotta be like to protect the buck.
We can change bylaws, not
I
saying.
mean,
that
that's-
we want to keep that.
I'd rather protect it again, look at,
Right.
you wanna assume everyone's gonna behave properly, but you always have to make sure that we've got guardrails against.
Wouldn't a guardrail be on anything like this from a chair perspective? Be, as a wrong word, I can't think of the word, like a challenge. A challenge can be brought up to any decision, blah, 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 with 2/3 majority.
So technically, if you wanna follow Robert's rules, there could be a motion to overrule the decision of the chair, which is a 2/3 majority. And if the chair were to appoint Mo, Larry and Curly to the board and the rest of the board members don't want Mo, Larry and Curly to be on there, there could be, and that would be brought under Robert's rule, motion of the chair, 2/3, pro con. There is a mechanism in Robert's rules.
That's what I mean, that's what-
Not to be a parliamentarian of it, but it is there.
Well, I mean, this is
I think
exactly
so.
what we're trying to do.
I think to the chair's point earlier, though, the gatekeeping that Jeff for this really is, like you said, is the point that you decide who you want your chairman to be. That decides what kind of way this is going to be run. So there
That's
is
right.
the gatekeeping point every 12 months.
There is every
If you
12
don't
months, but
vote,
that's true.
you don't vote.
That's true.
That's right. Yeah. And without adding extra complicated language in there.
But there is no mechanism to remove a chairperson, just so you know.
I'm not saying. I'm
But if there's already, If there's already a mechanism in Robert's Rules of
You know,
Order to object or
Overrule the decision.
overrule the chair.
You can spell it out in here though, because no one wants to be flipping back and forth through Robert's rules to.
Because if it's already there,
You can check this, but if I'm remembering from Model Congress, Model UN, I think that's what it was. So, hey, I'm gonna keep all the way through it. I know that.
Love it. Yep.
All right, we are in Article 5, meeting procedures. I think we're on page 7,
That's right, we'll go faster.
a little bit faster.
That in section 5, that's just typo. Section 6, that's just spelling out the number. Same thing on the second one, section 6. Section 8, I just added in public comment. And flag salute. And let's discuss chair items, so. We had discussed at some point. Adding in a vice chair item and giving the board the opportunity, if any board member that doesn't have their own section. To bring up an issue. So
And
that's.
I think it's a good idea, because Jeff's already doing it, and I think it's a good thing to do. It should be memorialized.
I mean, if we want to say chair items, I mean, whatever you want to call it, we could define what chair items is, which is. So just to simplify how it appears in the agenda, chair items. You know, parenthetically, which shall include any items for open discussion. From any member of the board. You know, kind of. I mean, we've always used that space for that anyway. Just predating Todd, we've always.
Yeah.
done that.
but again, it's not about the personalities, it's about if,
Right. Right.
Yeah, because Jeff, I added that because I feel that when I'm raising those, I feel like I'm interrupting your chair item time. So having it said it's okay to be board member time. Huh?
Perfect, yeah, no, but you're not, I mean, that's the
Right, but
spot.
that's your view, let's say.
Oh,
Sorry,
fair,
it's not like that.
Fair, no, you're right,
I think it should.
memorialize it, that's fine, that's not bad.
Notice of filing, so we're on section 11. Notice of filing at least 10 days prior.
Kara, I'm sorry, on the other one, informal discussions, would that be in a typical order of business?
Informal.
Yeah, an informal question from an applicant.
Is that in there?
No.
It's not, we should, informal, we don't have on here, you're right.
We typically put those first so they can get out of
At the
here.
door.
Yeah,
Oh, I see what you're
I
saying.
would say that.
But don't we usually have under old business or new business, we would then itemize new resolution, new hearing, new.
Yes,
informal.
but what I would say is that a informal question is technically a new business item, but we tend to schedule those before the
New business.
continuation
I got it,
of
okay.
hearings, so that we can get them out the door.
Okay.
So
I
we
see
wouldn't
what
want them
you're
to sit through,
saying.
testimony that's being
Alright, so informal hearings, we'll call that?
informal questions. What do
Question,
we
I
call
think
them?
it's, I think we called it,
no.
Eileen, what do we call those officially?
Informal discussions. Jen,
Oh, that's-
basically.
So yeah, put those after the minutes before,
After the minutes.
but what's
For
motion?
resolution,
Yeah, so I think we want to do the motion, so if there's any matter that's gonna be adjourned, we would have we don't always do that, but again, this is going back to here.
The other piece that we usually put in there before continuations are resolutions.
Right, because people that are
We want to be able to get them out the
recused, you
door.
wanna vote on the resolutions before anybody that's recused has to leave.
So I think we want motions for adjournment, then we want resolutions, then we want informal discussions, then we want old business, then we want new business.
Last thing that's not on here is what if we have to provide comments for conformity to governing body actions,
Like
like what we just did with the cannabis
wouldn't
ordinance.
that be old and
And
new?
we've always done.
Is that new business?
Yeah, I would say that's it, and you could
Okay.
list the new business however you want to list it. Now, always remember. We could amend this and move anything wherever we want.
Yeah, but no, I understand that, but again, what we've done. What we've done, and we may not have to do this way, but we've tried to get those done before we get into continuation of ongoing matters, only so that. We have enough time for them, if we've got a complex application.
Resolutions, informal discussions, review of ordinances,
Yeah,
then old business, then new business.
yeah.
It's fine. There's a beauty to being able to do it with circle.
Well, I mean, like, so if I think about like, what did we do? We didn't end up being this way, but we've done where it's like, we've done, there was an amendment to something, to one of the redevelopment plans, and then we had it, and then we had like Dolce after,
Yeah.
like that's. I would hate to have to do the amendment to the redevelopment plan after an hour and a half of testimony about the canopy of Dolce.
Yeah.
Right? Well, as entertaining as it was.
Do you get into the various sections, like if you did completeness, would you add completeness and then public hearings? Because completeness only takes about 15 minutes
We
in
had
general,
to put completeness before.
We do.
and that's usually a new application.
Should the old and new business have sort of an outline where it's like old business?
I think
They're even saying put completeness before.
I think old and new business are not the right categories. I
Yeah,
think what
that's
we have to
true.
say is, we should put the specificity of what we're, of how we're laying this out. We say, as Eileen's saying, all the stuff we said, then completeness determinations, continuation of matters, new
Yeah,
hearings
there you go.
is really what it ends up being.
That makes it much more clear.
Right?
So old and new comes out. We got resolutions, informal discussions, review of ordinances, completeness determinations, continuation of matters, new hearings.
Chair items, bills.
Yep,
Yeah,
chair items,
yeah.
and we will clarify.
Is there
chair
any,
items.
is there any reason why the bills are all the way at the end as opposed to being up top with like minutes and stuff like that?
They always are. Isn't that weird? They always
Because it's just not something that the public ever gets involved with. I think it's a courtesy to the public to
Okay.
get done last.
Okay,
On public comments, I'm noticing it's 7 to 7:15, but it should really be like 7:05 to 7:20 or just 15 minutes, because we start at 7, but you may not literally get there until a couple minutes later.
I would say, yeah, I think the second suggestion is
15 minutes.
15 minutes,
So,
because if we change the start time of any
Right,
meeting, we don't want to get
Yeah.
stuck.
I mean,
we put
you end up-
maximum of 15 minutes to make sure,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be 15 minutes if there's no.
up to 15.
Up to 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, but we've. If, I don't want to cut someone off mid-sentence, nor do I, if there's like one other person who wants to speak. It's chair's discretion
And
at
we
that
already
point,
have the 3-minute.
and we have a 3-minute rule
on
anyway.
that, so-
Yeah, so I mean,
If we put 15 minutes, and somebody complains we didn't have any.
That's
any
what I'm
time,
thinking.
that's-
so that leaves you with 5 people able to speak. What if there's 10?
Can the board vote to extend that? Like,
Later
like that
on
order?
there is some else in here about like the extension of time, about it being the discretion of the chair.
Let me come up with something.
Do
for
we
the-
have to specify how long?
You don't,
It seems to be complicated, why don't we just leave it out?
well,
Why specify?
Well, you don't leave it out. Again, this came in under Erica's administration, when I was chair, to say, you need to allow the public time to vent and speak.
I think she may cut out the reference of 15 minutes.
No, but if there was no reference to 15 minutes, and again, you think that everybody is here for the right reason, and you have public comments, and you have somebody go on social media and ask for 1,000 people to come up and read the dictionary, and they lined out the door.
Right, but again, the chair can cut that
Okay.
off, just like he can cut it in that, for 15 minutes.
So, well, if. We need, okay, so we have to balance these things. We need is the discretion for the chair to allow it to end of its own volition. But we also need the ability to have the chair say, well, we've exhausted our time for public comment, and being able to cut it off without the chair being seen as capricious and arbitrary and.
And I think we
Could
could
we
also
put-
put something in there that addresses that, relating to.
Um.
Borough matters. I mean, clearly coming up and reading the dictionary is not a borough matter. Could you
Yeah,
come up
but-
and read the stormwater
but-
management ordinance?
But
Yes.
don't you run into an OPMA problem? If you try to at all regulate what people say?
Well, but you have the same prerogative if you have somebody coming up and making an application when they say the exact same thing over and over.
But they could do something that's vaguely relevant.
That's what I'm saying. You can
Yeah.
come read the stormwater management ordinance.
Yeah, I'd like to read the master plan.
Yes.
I'd like to read you chapter 6 from Jane Jacobs' Death, Life of Great American Cities. I mean, how far do you want to go?
Of course, I mean,
So could we put?
We think about that, Aaron, let's look at that discretion.
I know.
Look at it with the discretion section.
Oh, so
Okay.
amended at the chair's discretion.
Or extended at the chair's discretion.
Extended.
Oh, that's good language.
Amended allows you to reduce it as well, though, then.
Well, the thing, yeah, because like no one was here from the members of the public,
Yeah.
we weren't gonna sit around for 15 minutes.
Well,
waiting.
exactly, that's what I mean, but
Yeah.
that's then at your discretion, you
Up to
amend it.
Up to 15 minutes, extended at the chair's discretion. Maybe, I don't know.
Or reduce, no, you want
Makes
to
sense.
reduce it as well.
You
So
work on the language.
15 minutes to be amended, I liked her just amended, which means either we
Covers anything,
lower or.
not allow it, cover as many as you want.
Okay, sounds good. And you all thought this was gonna be a quick.
Oh, I knew that was. Government. All right, so the next one is this
We're now
section
doing
11, where we distinguish between the filing of application documents and the filing of exhibits. And, you know, I know that we try to keep things moving as much as possible, try to be as friendly as possible, but you know, there is that requirement, and we do have, you know, the professionals that need to have time to take a look at things. Now, at any point in time, the board can say, and the professionals can say, you know, I haven't had time to take a look at this because it was just brought here tonight. Or the board can say, that's not really an exhibit, that's really a site plan amendment. You know, but I think that the rule has to be and should be that, you know, if you're making site plan changes to what's on file, that's gotta be on file 10 days before, so it can be posted, so it can be available.
Not just the professional, but members of the public.
Correct, correct. I'm just saying the professionals because, you know, they have they're always going to be there needing to review it, whereas members of the public may not be. But, you know, this I think clarifies it a little bit better, and the bottom line is the board has the ability to say, this was not there. We feel that this is something that should have been there, so we're going to carry it to give that additional time for not only the professionals, but the public to take a look at.
Makes sense. Any discussion on that one? Okay.
I like the changes that we put in.
It's just, the definition here though is, place the application documents on file. Can that be electronic or does it have to be in paper?
Eileen,
In other words, if I say, hey, listen, I emailed it to Eileen, I can't help it if people don't look at emails. I mean, so if an applicant gets their whole packet into Eileen, says, here you go, Eileen, I'm on 11:59 on day 10, and here's your email. Is that good enough?
via email and hard copy.
Except, no, I don't wanna burden applicants with hard copy on
Right.
file, except if it's on our checklist for it to be
Mhm.
a hard copy, but if we're talking about.
It's just, I'm only asking for a definition of place the application documents on file. And do we leave it vague? Do we leave it vague that says it's on file? It was there. It's in Eileen's email.
Well, why don't we say hand delivered to or email, hand delivered or emailed to the board secretary, administrator, sorry. Yes.
We require hard copies and electronic copies for our applications, right?
Correct.
So that would just be consistent, requiring the same, if they're submitting something for the board's consideration, shouldn't it be the same number as the original application in the same format?
Yeah.
You know, if we need 5 hard copies, what's the point of giving one, essentially?
Okay.
Does that work for how you actually do the work, Eileen?
Generally, what I've been doing is, if I asked all the applicants to file the plans with the board professionals directly and have the 6 copies into the Borough Hall as well as electronic. And, you know, certainly within the amount of time that is required, I generally contact either Beth or Bob to make sure that they have time to review that and ask for that time. I usually get direction from the board
6 copies.
as an application is going along. If an application comes in, then it's 3 weeks before, you know. It's generally when we get into these issues is when there are revisions to an application and there's a continuation of the hearing additional items that need to be submitted, that Bob has identified in his completeness determination. Those are those items that are 10 days prior, which may or may not give the Board of Professionals enough time to review.
Well, I feel like we dealt with.
It depends on the substantive materials that are being revised or.
Yeah, because we've run into situations where, not to speak of any open applications, but where there was a technical request from the engineer. It was being met by an applicant right up to a deadline. Bob has said, I do not have enough time to review highly detailed information, and we've had to push
Yes.
things back.
Sure, we've also dealt with the issues of completeness where it may be very easy to satisfy the completeness. So we've said, Bob, once you have received everything on your list, then we could schedule it for, yeah, exactly. Completeness and the public hearing, but we're not doing that. You know, or we did temporary waivers, then we schedule, I mean, we figured out how to do this in such a way where it keeps moving, but we're not foregoing any of the legal requirements.
So you've got language from Eileen that you feel.
Yeah, I think I could, yeah.
Okay.
And Eileen, it's 6 you need in your hands,
I'm sorry, what was that?
so copies directly to the board professionals, and you want 6, you usually get 6?
Well, it was 5 and now Mayor Carroll has asked for an additional, so 6, yes.
So we were
That, I mean, that does go against the checklist. I mean,
ordinance question.
Well, this is, we're gonna have to do that.
I know, but so we want to make sure that our bylaws are not inconsistent with the ordinance.
So we're gonna go back and change our bylaws, we'll be
No,
changing the ordinance?
I
No,
want.
we have the checklist,
I
as
want-
part of the master plan,
No,
Right.
so.
agreed.
So what I'm saying is that we want to, what I would rather do is not have to change 2 documents. I want to get down the road. I want to change 1. So if
Just make it in accordance with the checklist requirements?
There we go.
that's what I'm saying. And that way it lives with the checklist and in the ordinance and there's no ambiguity.
And Kara's the 5-day recommendation, I'm not sure why, if not required, why make a recommendation?
Well, an exhibit, if someone shows up with a colorized version of the submitted site plan, and it's an exhibit and it's substantively different. And it's literally meant just to help in the hearing. And it's just here in the room. We don't necessarily need that 5 days ahead of time. But when we were full remote and we needed to have stuff posted on the website for folks to review, it was a little different.
No, you're missing my point. From a legal document, although not required,
No, I hear what you're saying,
No,
I,
then why even?
well, and you're right, but I was trying to put my private hat on.
Okay.
And if something is not required, because we understand exactly what the chair is saying, that you may just be showing a landscaping plan with some extra greenery and a few other green bushes that you could easily digest. But if this is what the board would kind of like, and you want to impress the board and you want to make it easy for them,
Okay,
you know, you're better off trying your best to do it so that you have a happy board when you walk.
We're
in.
sending a signal, but we're not gonna ding them for not compliance.
Yeah.
and
it's-
that also says business days versus the other is 10 days. So we're gonna give our professionals business days.
I don't like it when you don't do documents.
Right?
You know, I have to
He's
say,
really lobbying for the secretary
that-
job, isn't he?
I don't
It is,
think
exactly.
it's not unusual for,
When he's not here next
Yeah.
meeting, let's go for a secretary.
Calendar.
But that,
um,
the other just have at least 10 days prior to the time appointed.
like, you
No,
know,
because that's different. Exhibits versus application docs. That's a
Right.
whole
It's
different
not-
for the.
I am
so,
the same
but the
second. You are.
application documents, professionals are writing their reports, they're presumably or potentially their initial reports, and so we need business days in order to get that done. What happens often, I'm calling myself out, but sometimes professionals don't issue reports particularly far in advance of the application. And so what happens, you've got a hearing on Tuesday, professional reports come out, you know, Thursday, yeah, Monday. But say Thursday, 5 o'clock, the developer is scrambling on Friday or Monday to have a team meeting to say, oh my God, how are we gonna deal with this? We need to put together an exhibit that shows this and that to the board. And so they have a couple calendar days to respond.
Correct.
So,
So maybe we should change that. That's the distinction
Yeah.
between the 10 and the 5. The 10 is the application documents, the 5 is the exhibit, but we can say 5 calendar days instead of 5 business days for the exhibits.
yeah.
Does that work?
Mhm.
That still requires board members to be vigilant over the weekend, doesn't it? I think that's what we're trying to avoid then.
I know.
So, because
I know.
5 calendar days, so includes the weekend, which not, we're volunteers.
Did they send the exhibits to the board members?
No, but if Eileen gets something, she will circulate it to the board,
She
but
will.
Eileen
Alright.
generally doesn't work, or should she on the weekends?
No,
I gotta
we
throw
should-
her a bone. She's always doing something.
I know,
Right.
but let's presume people get the weekends off,
And it may not be Eileen, right?
right.
That's funny.
Right, so someone who on Monday morning at 8:30 fires up their inbox and says, oh, there's 22 exhibits for the meeting and I'm gonna send them out to the full board.
Mhm.
It's not 5, it's because we do it on Tuesdays, it might happen that way.
And the board always has the ability to say, we need more time to digest this, even though it's not required, you know what I mean? So I
But we
think.
like to be nice to the applicant, so what we tend to do, and it does.
Agreed.
It
No-
has
nothing is
happened, right,
perfect.
it has
None of
happened
this-
before. We get things on a Monday to try and review for me, and we all have lives, you know, we're volunteers, but I want to give it the best look we can, so that's was the intention of trying to give board members more days to look at.
It's true, but
Mhm.
Especially if it's an exhibit for an important, some of the exhibits are substantial with information wise.
right, but I think what Kara's saying is that we could say, look, this is an exhibit by Boyle, but it is
It's really not.
hard for me
It's
to.
this, because that's, again, practical review's gonna flush some of these things out. I can call it whatever I want, but if that's a technical document that you guys can't sit there and look at it over there and
Mhm.
digest it quick enough, that's not an exhibit.
Mm.
That's something you need more time to do.
I
And
have-
it
yeah,
may be
feedback
because,
mechanisms too.
you know what I'm saying, so
Okay.
that, I think it's gonna flush that out a little
Okay.
bit. And I think everybody knows that you guys are definitely not
Yeah.
trying to hold up an applicant.
So we think calendar will suffice on the 5 rather than business then, if that matches with the 10 calendar days. So it's the same kind of days.
Yeah, so we didn't put, so it just says 10 days, so we could say.
Yeah.
Calendar there, and then,
Mm.
but again, this is your document.
Okay,
Yeah, and I have to say that there's been times when, you know, the board has been trying to be business friendly and applicant friendly to, you know, and the applicants submit the information. And it's not uncommon for Bob to text me you know, on a Saturday or Sunday, and I just did my report. Do you think you can send it out to the board? And that has happened often. Unfortunately, you know, it does not give the board enough time at times to review everything that is submitted.
and let's be honest, most of the review time that we care about is for the professionals. And most of us on the board are already reading their review letters. And
Mhm.
I'm just
And
gonna,
relying on their testimony.
and we're relying on the testimony, the questions that they ask in the hearing, and we read the reports. I mean, most of us prepare for the meeting on Tuesday, you know, and I'll put myself in that bucket, that's my,
Mhm.
I block off time on Tuesday to read stuff, and, that's okay, you know, but we have to make sure the professionals have enough time for
Mm.
their review, so
Absolutely.
10 makes sense. Okay,
So
experts,
next,
I think is
yeah,
the next
experts
question.
shall be qualified to the satisfaction of the board when selecting expert witnesses and reports or both. Planning board as a whole decide who's selected or just the chair. So with regard to this particular item, obviously the board votes on who to engage as experts. The board can ask questions of and accept as a whole an expert presented by the applicant. And the board can, in the event that you have a very technical application that may require a different expert. Or let's say, for instance, the testimony of your zoning officer, if it's something, you know, the chair has the ability to require somebody to come here and do testimony. If there's anything else that we need to consider, or any other questions or any other thoughts. With regard to qualifications or witnesses, I'm just throwing it out there, but I'm not really sure if there's anything more other than that.
So let's say, Chris Piquel, just to pick on a local guy, appears, who's been before this board a zillion times. Usually, we put they're qualified as an expert by the applicant, the applicant's attorney asks a couple of questions, da, 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 da. Generally, we kind of like, does everyone accept?
Yep.
Do we need to take a vote to accept their credentials as an expert, or as what we've been doing for as long as I've been around? Generally acceptable practice, just say, any objection, any questions, let's move on.
I would say that way is the majority of the way that boards do it.
The latter.
The latter. You can take a vote. There's nothing that I see requiring you to do that. I have very accepted the expert by not objecting. If you want to take a formal vote and take 2 seconds to do it, you can certainly do that.
I'm not saying, I'm not trying to add more burden here.
Agreed,
Because
agreed.
usually the language that I've used is any objections.
Yep.
And then we move forward.
Yeah, I think it's using it in the negative, any objections, instead of saying, I mean, think about it, you're gonna see the same professionals. And again, when you're trying to get through meetings and before midnight, I mean, you have 10 professionals and say, all right, let's take a vote, hey, for the vote. Eileen goes through and she said, even a yay or nay vote.
I was just saying we could do a yay nay vote, but you know, I personally, I think that that's sufficient.
Have you ever seen a board reject?
I have.
I-
They
What
were
did
not
that
a
look
regular expert, they were not like an engineer or a planner, they were somebody they were somebody that did not have the type of technical expertise.
How'd that board go about rejecting? If you remember that specifically.
I'm just gonna pause here to say this on the record. No, entirely something else. It looks like Eileen lost internet.
Oh.
So
Um,
we are being recorded, and she is the one taking minutes.
We need to.
So. I'm hoping she texted me that you're frozen and we weren't, so I think it's on her end and she just dropped
What are
off.
you making notes?
Did you
So-
text her back?
I wasn't gonna pull my phone out.
Doodles.
Well, I think she realized that she's not on the meeting. I wasn't gonna pull my phone out in the middle of the meeting.
Maybe
but-
this is the time for our phone.
We could take our
Yeah,
5 minute
like
break,
that.
but if that makes sense, but I don't wanna.
2-minute break, however long I leave is it?
Pass out some girls.
Absolutely. Here, so I'm-
Girls
2 minutes.
Let's take a cookie break. I'm gonna pause the recording so that's not recorded on.
Thank you.
We are taking a 5 minute break. from the record.
Ever again.
Okay, so I'm gonna gavel us back in. It is 8:52. For purposes of the record, Eileen, would you mind doing the roll?
Yes, Mayor Carroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Engelhardt,
Yes.
Mr. Campion,
Yes.
Mr. Dashna,
Here.
Mr. Levitt,
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Giffen,
Yeah,
Ms. Weitzman,
Here.
Mr. Hill,
Jim dropped off and he was having internet issues and it was a while ago and he has not.
yeah, he actually emailed something that he had a call that he might be a long time on.
So
as well.
let's just mark for the record that he didn't return now, and it's not like you're taking action, but just.
Right, and I have a time for him on his email. Mr. Semino?
Yes.
Mr. Eckel,
Yes.
Mr. Weintraub,
Present.
Mr. Schob,
Here.
Ms. Kaczynski,
yeah.
and Ms. McManus.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, so when we paused, Trent was asking a question about
Experts.
How they
experts.
rejected.
How that was rejected, or you were gonna tell a story?
Yeah, this person was, they were like an allied professional to what would typically be qualified. So like not an engineer, actually kind of similar to what we had in Dolce, not an architect, but designing aspects of a building. And so they sought to be qualified essentially as an architect, as a building designer, and the board said no. But we'll qualify you as somebody that's an expert in this particular area. It's kind of similar to, I feel like we had a similar conversation
We
with
did.
legal something or other at, for the Dolce application, I forget his last name.
We also had, didn't we have a conversation around this, the person who testified for the parking system that was part of one of
I
the
was
rough
gonna say that
applications.
too, yeah.
That
Very
we
specific.
narrowly qualified them,
Yes.
not as a,
He wasn't a structural engineer,
Right.
he wasn't, yes,
Yeah,
he was narrowly qualified on the particular proposed
type of structure.
parking system,
Correct.
but not any of the rest of the engineering questions. So we've done that.
I've seen somebody almost not be qualified. This is more of a lesson to any future experts if they listen to this, because they couldn't recall what year they got licensed, and it just threw the board into a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was like, was it 2005 or 2007? Are you sure you're licensed? Well, if you don't know what year you got licensed, maybe you didn't actually get licensed. So
I don't remember what you had
No,
passed the AICP.
I know, I thought the poor architect was gonna cry.
So again, looking at this, are we saying that it suffices for the chair to say any objections and look on the dais, right?
Do you want to write that down?
I mean,
The
that-
chair
that's-
has to ask if there's any objections.
Yeah, which again, I mean, he does, but we should clarify, that's what you do, it's not what everybody else would do, but we're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, at this point, we don't feel we need a formal vote.
That would be my recommendation.
If we can find some language in there.
Related, can experts need to be recused for the same reasons we do?
They shouldn't be here to begin with.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, it's like, it was a long time ago where something came up that they said, and I'm like, I was so new, I didn't bring it up, but I was like, does that recuse that person?
Wait a minute,
So-
so let's, who's
So
recusing?
hypothetically, if an expert witness is then talking about something and then admits that for something going on to around the structure that they designed, and then we find out that they were involved in the design of it, of the original structure that our application is going on to. Should they recuse themselves because they were involved in the original design of said?
Can I throw out a more typical scenario
Mhm.
that you might find where an engineer comes, and begins testifying, and due to board questions, like public questions or something, somebody realizes that that firm is actually doing work for the borough.
Right.
And
Is that
then
what you're talking about?
It's not quite, no.
But that's-
the
that
best
is-
example.
it's a little more
That's a better
straightforward and more
example.
likely, so it's not, I don't think it's a recusal, because they just may not be able, I mean,
To
they
testify,
just may not
correct.
be able to testify, they may have to leave the meeting.
I guess the
You're finding
question is,
answer.
we ask them before they testify, but if something comes up during their testimony, can we rescind accepting them as an expert?
How does that work?
and also, there's also a timeline. I mean, I've got 30 years worth, if I've done something 30 years ago, do I have to recuse myself from it now? Like, I mean, it's,
Yeah, I will tell you that the AICP code for planners says you can't appear on the other side of an issue within 2 years.
right.
So there's no timeliness.
A reasonable timeline, because if you're in a related industry, there's gonna be some overlap.
In a small town where there's only a small group of
Right.
experts.
But Jeff, in that instance, if we accepted them as a witness and then realized partway through the testimony, they'd given for the other side, some other side less than 2 years ago, would we then have to go back and wouldn't accept them?
Well, it's not a question of unacceptable. We have the ability to weigh or not weigh expert
Right.
testimony.
That's correct, but you
Right.
certainly don't want, I mean, the person remains an expert. Whether they're
Mm-hmm.
an expert or not, the issue is whether or not they're disqualified. If they're disqualified from providing testimony,
Mhm.
certainly somebody else can go back and somebody else can reiterate their testimony.
Okay.
I actually had a situation with a board and I can't say it, but I'm gonna say it, the professional was drunk.
Oh,
Right.
And I kind of knew the attorney and I was, saying, let's adjourn this to, like, and they wanted to get it done and this and that, and she put in a lot of testimony and it kind of took halfway through for us to even realize that. And then he kind of got the hint and they brought back a new expert and that new expert started from scratch. So, I mean, it's not the same thing, but it takes an issue of
That would
retestifying.
The people that sit at that table are witnesses. And I mean, that's the first time I ever went through the training process, and I don't know if everybody has yet, that's new, but they will, you know, this is a quasi judicial board. And you're supposed to weigh what you hear. So if you have an inkling or something comes up that may not disqualify someone, but makes you see them in a different light, that's the applicant's choice to put that person on the, and, you know, testify. So I think you as an impartial juror up here, for lack of a better word, are taking that testimony, processing it yourself, just like you said, hey, if I'm, it's kind of analogous of, hey, if I'm at the end and I know that I'm the time breaking vote, you know, I know that I have made decisions where literally 10 minutes before the hearing's over, I still haven't made my decision yet, no matter what they said in the paper, that we've all decided before it's even been heard. And I think that goes for this as well. You need to take that with a grain of salt, process the whole thing, and then you weigh all of the testimony and weight it accordingly, and then make your decision.
And the issue 9 times out of 10 that's gonna affect the validity of the vote are you guys appeal. You know, if one of the experts that's here, you've done work with, or they've done work for you, that's what's gonna affect the vote, not so much. Now, of course, if they're doing work for the borough, different story, but that's very infrequent because everyone's gonna know they did work for the borough. If they don't.
Right, but
they got a problem.
yeah, right, exactly, because it tends to be on board members stepping back in those situations rather than
Correct.
than not. So-
And the same thing goes for repeat consultants. If we have heard testimony before and we're analyzing, we just went through this, or is this person a professional? You know, are we accepting their credentials? We've accepted their credentials. They come back, we hear the testimony, the new application a year or two later. We accept the person's credentials, same person, we've accepted them again. But again, you're giving an impression as a witness. So that impression is, you have to kind of wipe the slate clean and take that, you may not have believed that person the first time they come, but you need to now look at that testimony as a completely new application.
And it can also be a set of circumstances. I've had situations with experts that I've brought before boards. And I've had the attorney of the board say to one of my experts, now, whether you're an expert or not, is your qualifications, your licensing, your years practicing, your ability to appear before the board, the subject matter you're talking about. But I've had an attorney turn around and say, are you sure you want to say that? Because you were just here 6 months ago and said something totally different. And that's something that sometimes plays into it also.
So let's move on.
Sorry.
Appreciate that.
No, this is good stuff. The next red line I see is on section 20 under testimony.
Yes, this came about as a result of COVID, obviously. So, if we're gonna continue offering Zoom as an option, we have to be able to see your face. Voting, this is really just, I think, a additional belt and suspenders of what we've been talking about before with regard to numbers and voting. Same thing with 25. Karen, do you have a question?
Just on the 20,
Yeah.
does the opposite, do we need to put wording in for the opposite? So what I'm saying is, you're saying if they're on the Zoom, they have to be on Zoom and they can't point it at the ceiling, for instance. But so sometimes we've had situations where they're sitting here and our camera doesn't catch them very well. Do we have to put in that if they're here, they have to be visible to people watching by Zoom also?
We
Clearly,
certainly can.
I don't know what the
We
matter is.
certainly can. The point of this is to say that we need to know that it's you, Karen Giffen, who's testifying. So by virtue of seeing you now, if we don't know who you are, you can put whatever name on the bottom of your Zoom that you want, but we need to put a face with a name that's on the recording. That's, so.
I mean, worry about it the other direction, because let's say the other direction, where the other direction matters would be, so let's say we had a hearing tonight and we had a problem with the camera, but the recording was working for the audio. Right, and so if someone sitting in the witness chair kind of couldn't see because of the position of the camera, but Hannah could still listen and engage in the process.
Mhm.
Audio recordings is long established as being sufficient to
Yeah.
participate.
Right.
So I wouldn't wanna force us to deal with camera angles.
And they're sitting in front of us, so we
In
know.
front of The board is sitting here, the meeting is here.
Because just because we have these new rules that were presumed, do we need to make sure that happens, but if this is sufficient,
Yeah,
I
well,
think-
I withdraw my.
I think if somebody's on Zoom and doesn't feel that they got e- enough testimony, was able to, for some reason, not able to analyze that testimony properly, then they should maybe recuse themselves from, or like abstain from that, whatever decision that, or follow up at, like, if it's a second meeting,
Yeah.
follow up afterwards and say, hey, I wasn't able to see that exhibit as clear enough, I'm gonna come in
Yeah.
and come in and take a look at it. So there's plenty of opportunity there, but yeah, I wanna stress that the audio is what, like, if, as long as you heard the whole thing, I mean, I distinctly remember, listening to Diane's CDs in my car as I was driving when I missed a meeting. And yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're old, but yeah, and we were able to hear everything and then sign it. Right, and then sign that said, yes, I did, listen to the tape.
Yeah,
I think you're more of public rather than us.
Yeah.
And them saying it would affect a decision because they couldn't see. it.
One of the things we've always said, and I think the chair and we've made it perfectly clear when we decided to offer this dual participation. If one of the applicant's witnesses could only appear via Zoom, that's fine, we'll work with you, but understand, if we can't see you, that's at your risk.
Right.
If your audio goes out,
Right.
that's at your risk.
Your
Members
internet
of the
fails,
public-
that's your risk.
Members of the public, we're here, we're
Right.
1 square mile town, you're welcome to come here, if you wanna do it via Zoom.
Mhm.
If the connection fails, that you're operating at risk.
Yeah.
That is,
Right.
we've made it very clear that we want hybrid meetings to increase access, but the
How-
meeting happens here.
How have you made that clear?
We've told every applicant who's asked us. that-
Okay.
That about remote participation.
But, okay, but
Should
people
it
in the
be
public,
They know that we're up here too, which is why we were having the Zoom links on all the agendas on the side, on the web page until for some reason my company's decided to stop putting them up there, but we were,
Guidelines together. for
we had
the
Zoom guidelines that we
Yeah.
adopted 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we went to board meetings.
Daniel Law
What are they attached?
Is what?
is Daniel Law Daniel's Law Fear. Is fear of Daniel's Law, is that why he did it?
Taking that down.
I don't know.
I hope not, because it has nothing to do with
Because I think it was
it.
the link to the Zoom. meeting.
And if it's Daniel's law of fear, then he's in the wrong.
He's
I
interpreting.
don't know why he took it down. That's the
I don't
only
know.
thing I can think of.
No, but we want as many people to participate as possible, and so that's why it had always been
Much
until
longer, yes, and it's not, that reasoning is not accurate, it's not.
I'm leaving it to the council of mayor to deal with that. But we've always wanted to have, I wanna keep the hybrid meeting as long as we can, right? Because I think it allows for more participation. not
You know,
just-
I guess I'm digressing because I'm just asking like. When we have a public hearing on an ordinance and people call it in, we never say to them, you're at risk not coming in here because if your Zoom audio goes out. And we're not, like, it's not our problem that you can't do public hearing testimony, right? Like, so I'm curious about this.
I think the mindset was more along the lines of, once we say that it has to be offered this way, and
Yeah.
that's an obligation of the board, then we can't do any work if something happens. So let's pretend like we were in COVID times. If all of a sudden the only avenue was virtual and the virtual went out, we had to cancel a meeting. So the mindset is, we want to have the meeting, we want to continue the meeting, we're offering this not as an obligation of the board or of the law at this point, but a courtesy. But everyone needs to understand that that's what it is.
So how do
It's
you,
a courtesy.
where is that? Like, is that
I'm
in
gonna
here?
look to see, I know we put it in writing.
Because I would like to do that at the council.
Yeah, I know we definitely put that in writing.
We did, we had a Zoom.
Was it our rules of citizen, the Zoom
Zoom
participation?
participation was in there someplace.
Yeah, let me.
We adopted a whole set of rules after, well, again,
Oh,
part of it was
wow.
governed by the emergency order, then once the state of
Yeah.
emergency was lifted.
Yeah.
And DCA,
Right.
we then were able to say, okay, we're gonna continue hybrid meetings, and not every jurisdiction has continued hybrid meetings.
No,
We-
But the reason why
Sure,
we
you-
did is we saw an uptick in participation, and that's the most important thing.
More people were able to come to meetings.
So we figured let's continue it because at least we've got more people participating and that's the most important thing.
I mean, the
But
fact that we've
not-
got 13 board members here tonight is
Yeah.
because we've got this Zoom
Yeah.
option, and
Mm.
that's always good. Now, obviously, if we're like, there's technical issues. We tried when we had to move to a larger venue.
Yeah.
A pain in the neck.
Pain in the neck.
And not ideal, we're not at home here, but absent those kind of things, and honestly, the courthouse is not great for the Zoom setup. But we've got this pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So,
All right, I'll see where I can
see
find
if
it.
we find the language. Okay, voting margin, section 23.
Same thing, just really reiterating, the number of votes that are required, reiterating that just incorporated for all provisions of the municipal land use law. I also put in there the land use law and case law. When you have this board acting as a board of adjustment, you are restricted to 7 members. That does not mean you are entitled to 7 members. And I've dealt with this on both sides of the aisle. You are required to have 5 votes. A applicant can continue to delay or adjourn until it has more board members, but I've actually briefed and gotten at least one board attorney's opinion that there is nothing in case law or the municipal land use law that says I am entitled to wait for a vote until you have 7 board members. That is
We
not-
had this last year.
You can choose, but they're not entitled.
Exactly,
Mhm.
And the
exactly.
board has to give an extension if applicable.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, but if for some reason you only have 6 board members on that application
Which is
for an
what we had
extended period of time,
Oh, fine.
there's 4 or 5, there's no. There's no entitlement that you could go to court and say they have to find up to 7 board members. There's no entitlement that's there until the court rules otherwise.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because if
Maximum.
if they need 5 affirmative votes and they wanna take it loose too.
Margin of error.
All right, 25, kind of the same thing, 7 or 9. People are alternate board member, that's that voting. Let me make sure it's it. Also, board member shall be precluded from voting notwithstanding the fact that such alternate. So this is just your
Mm.
issue.
It's tidied up throughout. It keeps
Yeah.
popping up because it was in like several places. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
We just put it everywhere all at once. That's the name of it.
Extensions, section 27. So there is no, so this deals with recusals, so it's perfectly clear, and this is. Not voluntary recusals, this is required recusals of class 4 and class 3 board members. It is perfectly clear that a board member that has to recuse themselves due to a conflict that is also a property owner within 200 feet has the right to sit in the audience and has the right to ask questions. They have a property right, that property right is not taken away by virtue of their conflict on the board. There is case law that talks about if you are a class 1 or a class 3 member, not only are you removed from the dais, but you should not be sitting in public because some people have made the argument that there's a, what's the right word, intimidation factor.
Who tells the mayor to leave the room?
When you say who tells the mayor.
Yeah, the mayor sat in the room for the vote, who tells the mayor to leave?
Well, I think we should put this in here as something that we're going to require.
I mean, I'll
Because
leave,
this
but I
is-
know.
Yeah, and I remember
I know
when,
private mayors haven't all left.
you know, and I remember when we put this in, and it was, again, years ago, and saying like. Why, I don't care if they're in the room, like when I was, but it was, I think it was you saying, okay, so the mayor's out there and gives you the eye.
Yeah.
And it all of a sudden says, wait, they're giving a
Does he
signal,
sit out here during the shelter vote?
they're giving a
And,
signal.
and honestly, I tend to take just my personal opinion, the flip side. Just because you're not sitting there doesn't mean I don't know how
True.
you want me to vote. So, that quote unquote intimidation factor,
True.
can be regardless of whether you're here in the hallway or down the street in your house.
You're accused, you should not be in the room, that's my personal opinion.
So,
It's
but
always done off the
Okay,
dais, right?
So one is, but there's a
that's a
difference,
definite.
Yeah.
That is
but there's a
definitely
difference
happening.
between the class 1 and 3 and then the class 4 members.
Correct.
I think,
Correct.
right?
Yep, and when you recuse yourself for a conflict, you cannot participate and ask questions unless you are a property owner within 200 feet.
So let's take, I'm just hypothetical that the mayor or the council person is a property owner within 200 feet.
Knew you were gonna ask that question.
Of course,
I have not looked into that. My gut would tell me that since it's a statutory recusal, regardless of whether you own property within 200 feet, you would have to recuse yourself, but I would look at that. I don't know if you've come across that
I
issue.
have not had that issue.
Wow,
Did you
wait,
say
so
that-
doesn't the US Constitution trump state statute? For freedom of speech for your own property rights? And I'm just playing. devil's
No,
advocate.
I hear you. I have, and
I
that's,
mean, I,
that's
like,
the,
the Spice Factory, I am not within 200 feet, but if I was. My constitutional rights seem to trump state statute.
and that makes perfect logical sense, and that's the mindset, which is why you're allowed to stay here and even have that ability to do it, because you have that property right.
but we don't know if it's a class, again, this is all hypothetical, because we don't have anything coming down the
No.
road where the class 1 or the class 3 are within 200 feet and have specific prescribed rights under the MLUL.
If somebody recuses themselves because perhaps a business relationship, do they still have the ability to make comments?
No.
So for any recusal,
Yeah.
okay.
You're recused, you cannot influence, comment, anything on the
So,
application.
I mean, just to give the example most recently, so when I recused myself because of personal relationship with the Family Promise application, I did not participate at all in any of that process. Susan recused because she was next door to the property, but was within the 200 feet and was able to ask questions and do all that. So that's the difference here.
Yep.
You know,
But there's that extra added layer.
But if
you
that
are opposed.
application came through today,
Exactly.
I would be
Well,
not.
I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Trying to figure out.
100%, that's exactly.
It was a question, not a.
Yep.
So do we as a board then get to decide on whether we feel that in the intimidation factor you talked about? Dais is for sure, everyone's off the dais if they're accused, but are we gonna decide as a board if they're allowed to sit and listen?
It's not a
requirement.
Getting back to this though,
Yeah,
This is
I
the-
agree.
the mayor, council person, principal is really because it can end up a backup to the council.
Right.
Right?
But they have not changed the legislation to require that. You are 100% right. This particular board, this particular borough has voted not to allow appeals of denials of D variances to the
Right, but I'm
government.
just saying,
But they haven't changed
but
that statute.
I get recused from hearing something because I'm the mayor, but I'm
Yes.
within my property rights. That's now a conflict at the council level where I wouldn't be able to hear an appeal anyway.
Hmm.
So I think I
Oh,
still
good
have the
question.
right to sit out in the audience and bitch and moan and complain.
that's the
Or
question.
opine, because I'm gonna have to recuse myself anyway. Not
But
because
you
of
don't
the
even
appeal
do
part,
that.
but because I'm in real conflict.
No, yeah, the mayor has a good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
If-
But we don't do that, you know, we don't do
Right,
that.
I know we don't.
I know we don't do that, but if the two of us had to recuse ourselves, and we're not gonna hear the application up there anyway, and we're within 200 feet.
You're
Yeah.
talking logically.
Yeah, I
and
think
that would
it's
seem to
lo-
make
it's very
logical sense.
logical, yeah.
But you're gonna look into it
I'm
and
gonna
get
look
back
into
to
it.
us.
And in 1 square mile town, that could happen.
Yeah, it's a problem, because we're a small town, the adjacency and property rights are far more common here
Yes.
than in other
Right,
towns.
and for me, it's not necessarily what we were just saying about, do we feel there's an intimidation factor? I look to you, Kara, to say, I just don't want to be sued,
Yeah.
because we know the frivolous lawsuits to say, the mayor was out there and therefore I'm suing you. That's what I just want to be protected against that. To say, like, I don't really care, and nobody's gonna influence me, so, that, they can sit right here, so.
That's what this is all for, is to make sure that we don't.
Right.
get involved essentially, right?
So the question is, do we want to establish a policy that not only says leave the dais for the class 1 and 3 members, but asks them to leave the hearing room? Or do we just want to leave it as it is now, which is they tend to leave anyway, but we're not going to put a policy in place one way or the other? I mean, that's really the open question. That's
And if they leave the desk, Can they still make comments
No.
for any reason?
No. The only time you are permitted by statute to make a comment is if you have a property right into it. If you are recusing yourself for whatever reason, either statutorily, well, again, we gotta look at the statutorily issue, but if you know, you had some other recusal, you happen to work with the engineer, that's the engineer of the project. you
Okay,
can-
but I have a question. So we've, over all these years on completeness, we always say, completeness is exactly what, it's a formality, it's a checklist, right, it's administrative. So we always say, well, let's not bother moving on, just stay here, sit, just, and you don't get called. Are we saying that we're not gonna bother doing that anymore, and we all gonna have to stand outside in the rain while we finish the?
Well, but no, they don't-
you know,
but you could stand outside the room.
But I mean, I'm fine with that, but
It's
that's, I
completely
just think,
different than a public hearing.
no, it's not, that's what I'm
It's a
saying,
vote,
is are we,
it's a vote,
Still
I
a
mean, you
vote.
should-
are we changing, if we're
You
changing
can't
all these
participate,
rules,
you can't participate,
and we did it, and we don't.
exactly.
But I think the 10 years is a minimum, but I'd like to see your review of those laws and
Okay,
then see
so-
where we stand, and then I think a guideline, Chairman, would be useful simply because we're
Yes.
coming up with all these scenarios where should we have done this, should we have done that, and to Todd's point, I think it would be good to just be clear and just all go by those guidelines.
Yeah, so Kara, can you do a little bit of homework here, and then we'll come back with another?
Yep.
Okay,
And just a quick question, since abstentions have always been a little bit mystical for me. But
Abstentions?
yes, but since they count
No, extensions or absent.
abstention.
Oh, I'm sorry,
So,
sorry.
since they count and affirm the measure of the majority. When we have, when we publicize the result of a vote. Why do we then say the vote passed 6-3 with one abstention?
would be-
Well, it can't, because that's
would be
10 people.
I'm sorry, my bad, sorry, it's late, it's late.
Five,
So, but why say that? Because I think people abstain, just sort of back away and say, listen, I'm abstaining, I'm not part of this. When the fact that they're abstaining and they're just saying, I go with the majority of what the board wants. I was, I was, an
No,
abstention was
an
more,
abstention is not counted. There is,
it's not counted, but it affirms a measure by the vote of the majority.
Beginning of the unread.
Yeah.
It actually counts as with the
Yeah.
majority that goes in, so I think, is your point that like.
Why
if
do it?
five votes
Yeah.
yes, 2 abstentions, we should record 7 yes,
Yes.
should we? Or is it just assumed?
What that means.
And it's
Part of the whole.
They're part of the whole.
So if we have,
Two
right,
are part of.
if we have
what makes
9
it-
members voting on something. And 2 people abstain from the vote, you still need 5 affirmatives.
Yes,
Yes.
but to Todd's point,
Or
what
do you
the
need
rules say, those abstentions count as counting with the.
Count towards the
affirmative, So we
affirmative.
would
Right.
abstain.
no, but it's sent to the vote of the majority, so the concept of that is the majority is already established.
Yeah.
But why bother? I don't disagree with you. Maybe I wanna look into why it's
I just don't know why.
said that way.
Yes.
If the majority of the voting would, see, if the majority of those voting would affirm a measure, extensions would be counted towards the affirmance. If the majority, so really, it's a non-issue. I don't look at this language as saying anything, but you don't count the abstention. Because it's not gonna change the vote, because the vote is whatever the majority is, and the abstention is not counted towards the majority.
Okay, I guess I was just looking at what, from the 20 some odd years, typically abstentions come during election cycles. Towards the,
Okay.
and I'm abstaining, hey, I didn't, well, yes, you did vote
I'm
with the majority.
neutral, Yeah.
You're not neutral, you're not neutral if the board
Yeah,
passes, you're not neutral if the board denies, you're part of that. I guess it's just more, I read that, honestly, I always
But
glossed
see,
over
and
this
that's
until.
actually interesting, because if we really start, and I was joking before, obviously, so I was like, you're reading this, because you always bring up good points, and I think this is one of them, that I don't read this as saying that the abstention can change the majority vote, whatever that is,
No.
in favor or against it. And in fact, when it comes to voting on the resolution, only, and maybe that's where this comes into play, but I've always done it that only the people voting
Voted in
in
the affirmative.
favor of the motion,
Right.
whatever that is,
Yeah.
can vote on the resolution.
Maybe
So
they'll still
what
stay in
is
that.
this?
those people can vote for the resolution. But also I read it more at, but to your point, if 2 people abstained and 2 people voted no, the no vote is 2, it's not 4. I think that's what this is saying. It doesn't bolster up the no vote. An
True.
abstention keeps the no vote at 2 and the measure passes.
I mean, and
Yeah,
even
but
when
I
we
don't know why
go,
we would need it again.
and even if we go and we look at the last sentence there even adds more confusion or conundrum to it,
Yes,
because it says if you have no majority, then that abstention isn't counted at all.
Yeah, it's very strange.
But it's not counted at all anyway.
So can I ask a stupid question? Do we have any discussion of abstentions at all? the bylaws?
Yeah.
Can we take a look and see why?
I think that language is right from Robert's rules on an agreement, so I think it
Yeah.
probably just come from that.
I know, but like.
I think it's the same person that wrote it.
I want to add
This feels
something.
like a Board of Ed question.
Yeah, I want to add something to what Todd said though, for more for the edification of the new folks in the room. And that is, Todd was a little kind of negative Nelly that I've only seen this happen during election season. And I disagree with that because I know there's been things that I've abstained on. And years ago, that had nothing to do with election season. It was whether there was something that I didn't feel comfortable about and I abstained. So
I don't know.
yeah, I don't necessarily
Well-
think that, but yeah, I know what you were thinking and I agree with you.
And I think
but
it just, the thing is that abstention doesn't mean you're neutral.
Agree.
Abstention means you're going with the majority of
So
the.
can we fall down the
If you
field?
don't feel it,
Yes.
if you don't feel it, abstain. If you don't feel it, abstain.
Okay. Karen's gonna do some research on abstention. Okay, 28.
28, this talks about one member of the original hearing panel. To a member of the, all right, so this is going back to the alternates. The alternate continues to vote unless and until there's all of the members, the actual voting members are there.
Okay, so then the next, we're now all the way into master
And I'm
plan.
sorry about the formatting.
Don't worry about it, it's
I
fine.
don't know what that- Master plan hearing, so discussion point, do we want to impose time period that propose master plan revisions or provide support prior to discussion?
What does the statute say, Beth, on master plan?
Is this about how often the master plan has to be?
No, that's.
No, this is about if the board wants to be able to review master plan or revisions that they want to have enough time to do it. That's what this is about.
Like the documentation question previously on
Oh.
application.
Yeah,
We're given the documentation in sufficient time.
yeah, why don't, I don't think that's a bad.
Should be the
suggestion.
same as other pieces, 10,
Well,
5.
because the 10-day requirement is statutory, right?
Yeah.
But that a master plan must be on file and provided to county, adjacent municipalities and all the rest of it 10 days before, right?
Yeah, and that's typically, and that's typical, what we had for our last master plan was a very unusual circumstance. But typically, if you think about past ones, I think most recently prior was probably your housing plan in 17, I think. But once the plan goes on file, it's distributed to the board, even as, it's new method for.
Right.
But that's, it's 10
10
days
days.
guaranteed that it's completed and available for review, and the board members should have it. Maybe that 10 days falls on a Friday, and maybe you get it over the weekend or Monday morning, but that's how it typically works. And also, I'm sorry, before I forget, section 1 references 6 years for the master plan.
Yep.
I think that should be 10.
Yeah.
That says re-exam.
I think it's still 10.
Re-exam is 10 also?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So do we need to add any language here? Because the MLUL talks about that 10 days. Do we need to add an extra provision here?
You could state that documents placed on file shall be immediately distributed to the board members. And that would just put a fine point on, once the 10-day notice period hits, board members need to have whatever it is that's subject to that 10 days.
That covers that, but it doesn't cover any revisions or amendments thereof.
Yeah, because they all need to, if the board's gonna vote on it, it's still a 10-day notice period.
If it's a substantive change, it's gotta get reissued to all those other jurisdictions. Anyways, the clock starts.
Yeah, if you wanna amend a single substantive word in your 2022 master plan, it's gotta be on file for 10 days prior to your vote.
Okay, we're up to miscellany.
Okay, and this talks about, and this is entirely new. This is not something that is regulated by the MLUL. My understanding is that this was placed in here for discussion. Placed in here for discussion. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
So, let me just say, I support every one of these points about not putting stuff in at the last minute when a new mayor's coming in. That would mean imposing that on myself, that I'm not gonna pull any of this stuff, but having said all that, that little bullet under section 2, vacant positions be filled before election day only. That is statutory by state law, that it is a mayor's prerogative. And that just because I say I won't do it, doesn't mean I can impose that, or we can impose that on anybody else. But I do support that, you know, not allowing me or any other, because it won't be me necessarily.
You'd be the
another
only
mayor.
mayor who hasn't.
Yeah.
I know, but
You'd be
it's
the only
really
one.
wrong, it's wrong, and I support putting that in the bylaws that,
But statutorily, that's when I read it, I was like, this is beyond.
well, we could, no, statutorily, the planning board could say, we're not gonna have these meetings, we're not gonna do this. Statutorily, you can't stop a mayor from making appointments.
Right.
Right,
And the only other things I would say is the second 2 bullet points. I mean, we would have
I
to
have
make
deep
sure we didn't run a
concern.
ballot period.
Yeah, this is my concern is that
That's.
we are now saying to any applicant who wants to do business in the borough of Flemington, you have to take off for 2 months.
Yeah.
Starting an application,
What is
because November, the earliest the election day can be is November 2nd. And then the reorg meeting is after usually January 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th is late for 2 months that nobody can do any business on development
Or
in
just
town.
because the vote could be in that late.
Well, this says no new
public-
There's no public hearing, no public hearing,
Oh, from the
no,
election.
from the election, so we're
You
talking.
could maybe stack up.
We are shutting down an applicant's ability
Oh, I see what you're saying,
to-
okay, okay.
to say, I want, I mean, let's go all the way through. I want to open up a business on Main Street
For Christmas.
and for Christmas, and I want to be able to, I need, it's a minor site plan, but it needs review. You're now saying that this board is shut down
Got
for
it,
2
got it,
months.
got it. Yeah, I
It's,
get
it is a huge burden on applicants.
I thought.
But I understand like what the idea behind this is.
I understand the idea behind appointments, which, you know, whether you agree with it or not, on which side of that you're.
Can't touch it,
I don't
can't touch it.
understand the application aspect, the new business aspect, that piece I don't get.
You're basically saying for a quarter of the year or more, you basically can't do business with the land use board because it's November, December, honestly, it's at least half of January. And frankly, it's also, you know, like the month of August, because we have people have mini schedules, you typically have people on
Oh, so you're saying
vacations.
in addition to
And
that.
it just becomes, you know, I can do a spiel on what the workload is throughout the year with boards, but if you take the last couple months of the year and say basically the land use board does not exist at that point, I think you're really doing harm to what happens in the other months of the year and to good people that are just trying to get.
Well, it eliminates any
Because it's
lane
also.
stuff.
Like a, it's.
If we stop the last meeting before Christmas, like no public hearings, if we start a process in November and it's going on and the timetable looks like it's gonna push right before Christmas or, you know, whatever, can it carry to the next year?
Yeah.
Right?
We've done it. We
That's
did it
what we
this year.
want to do is not allow big public hearings and vote.
I would
But it's subjective.
I would recommend that you guys deal with that on a case by case basis, and
Like
I'm
we
sorry,
always
but
have.
never say we're unwilling to hold a public hearing because the mayor will change, but the reality is. People have vacation schedules, they have holiday schedules, and it's frankly, it's pretty difficult to get meetings in November and December just to begin with.
I would hate for this board
had special meetings last year to.
We didn't have special meetings.
And it was.
No.
All meetings were noticed last year.
Stuff done.
And we
in that
scheduled 2
period.
meetings.
Not applications, but work. There's work as well as application, but we did the master plan, we reviewed several.
No, I understand,
But now is what's the basis? What's the reason for this?
Those things can be applied before November.
Political.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it sends a political message.
Yeah, it says your application is based on the politics, not the criteria that you're, of your proofs.
Because there's no other reason.
I'm really worried about us getting.
Yeah,
forgetting-
because I looked at this and said,
Businesses here.
again, if you were taking this as, well, this is an interesting way to look at it. I was coming at it from a totally different angle and saying, no, it's every election cycle. Anytime when Rs versus Ds changes the council, that triggers any mayoral, that triggers, and it's not just planning board, it's any council work, any HBC, any planning board, any environmental. The borough shuts down after an election and does not pick up again until January,
It
because,
doesn't even stop just in those instances.
Right.
That's an R stay Rs and Ds stay Ds and mayor stays mayor.
right, so I looked at it and said, wait a minute, what, are we actually saying that it's based on who's in office, not land use or not environmental, not like, does the HBC?
When I
could-
read this, I saw it as people being afraid of pushing, like me pushing an agenda through at the last minute. I get it, I didn't see the flip side. But that's how, when I
Yeah,
read
because you
it,
look at it, you say, wait a minute, why stop with us? So, like, there is no lame duck, and a mayor, or why not say the mayor gets elected on November 2nd, they become mayor November 3rd?
Well, like I said, if that's, and if
And
we
council.
actually were like any other country in the world, where they actually have a very short period between
Right.
elections and swearing in,
You
but we
could.
don't, and we have this.
Yeah.
We have this 2 month, it's just the nature of American democracy.
And I go back and forth on, look at my Thanksgiving meeting, you put it back in,
Yeah.
I have had Thanksgiving since I was burned of accusing people that they couldn't eat their turkey.
Right.
So never had that second meeting of Thanksgiving, because it was, I was publicly.
But the
vilified.
problem has been
we're
that
having,
from the
Meeting on
week of Thanksgiving.
for having it.
We all, it,
We all
it was
got
with the
burned.
largest votes, it was for cut glass.
Oh, yeah.
The largest
I was,
one happened.
we were there, remember that?
Yeah.
Predict it's really difficult to predict how an applicant's kind of process is gonna happen. Sometimes things go quick, sometimes things go slow, sometimes the applicant is delaying things. Like our calendar is constantly moving, and it's a fluid document, like the master
So
plan
let me
is.
throw another scenario here. If you've got somebody who's under contract to purchase a piece of property and that
Oh
contract
my God.
expires at the end of the year,
Yeah,
and their
exactly.
contingency is based upon approvals of
I didn't
whatever,
see it.
they're gonna suffer.
I read, like, politics out of all this, but.
I'd like to.
And I do
It don't look like it.
Yeah, right.
If I'm an applicant and
I went to business in Flemington if they.
no, I'm not even going there. If I'm the applicant and I like that mayor that's coming in, I'm gonna ask for an adjournment until January.
All that, yeah.
There's that.
You know what I'm saying? It's a lot.
Any applicant can do that, right? So any applicant has the right to say, oh, okay, you know, there's a new administration coming in, there's X number of vacancies. This, I trust that this person's gonna appoint people who are more favorable to my application than who's on the board currently. People time their applications all the time.
And
That's fine, that's
Like, sizing ourselves by doing this.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's been talked through. That was it.
The
Okay.
last thing is that, I'm sorry, the last piece.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about
Which was always in there, I don't understand, and again, it's been in there for a while,
Wait,
why an amendment? But right, we're saying these bylaws are, you know, you gotta look at this board to say, I've seen some new faces along the 20 some odd years I've been doing it, but by and large, the board sort of has some momentum and a lot of smarts behind it. So to say, listen, if you want to amend these rules, guys, you need 2/3 majority. We're not going majority, you know, we want 2/3 majority. We want to make sure that it's not easy, not that it's easy, but one more vote or two more votes. But then it says, oh, by the way, you can do a whole new thing in January, just call it a day with the majority vote. I was like, wait a minute, why should it always be 2/3 majority? Why should you always need a higher?
Or a
hurdle?
majority, either or.
Either or, but I mean, if we set a higher hurdle to make an amendment, why would we set it at that same higher hurdle to change?
So you're saying get rid of that last section?
Yes, make it all 2/3. So let's. I know, but I didn't know that either. I listened. No
I
idea.
was, I don't remember that.
I do not remember. That's all.
No, I just.
I mean, I know like.
Discussion.
I think because what happens is, remember, even when we did this the first time, like I go to look to the new members, like you get a little bleary eyed.
Yes.
Get a little bleary eyed, you go like, live with uncle,
Yeah,
2/3,
yeah,
majority,
yeah.
what? Go,
So,
so,
so what we're saying is then get rid of the exception and just have the in writing 2/3 done.
Yeah.
As a consistent rule.
Some kids from other towns, I remember he merged other things.
yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
True.
I think we should say something and I'll put the language because I'm getting a little weird too, but not just the rules may be amended, but a new set of rules can be adopted also, like either which way, it should be all encompassing. If we're gonna go with 2/3, it should be, because you could do, they say, an amended and restated, you can do
Yeah.
something like that. Or you can just do something that says, I'm just going to amend section 1 to take out XYZ road. It should be anything, to your point,
Right,
it should be consistent.
Yep, okay,
sorry.
all right, so, good. Any other comments on all of this? Look, the fact is it's 9:40. The other piece that Kara was talking about was the public comment acknowledgement piece of paper. Yeah, so let's deal with that.
Is this similar to a Board of Education when I see the folks sign something at the podium? Is this what they're signing?
No, they're actually just putting their name on a line.
That's, okay, okay, wasn't sure.
Not require you to just give your information before you speak, just so they,
Don't have to go back.
yeah, it makes things a little faster.
You can write your own name, you can write.
So Kara, can you explain this?
I mean, listen, we talked about the fact that, and I don't know if the boroughs made a definite decision in the council meeting as to how they're dealing with things. Are they asking for addresses? Are they not? The concern from the board's perspective is there may be times when someone's location is important, especially if, you know, they're making, for instance, stating facts about the situation. There's always somebody outside creating noise at this time. Well, how do you know? Well, I live within 200 feet. I live next door. That's gonna be much more important than somebody who says, well, it's when I drive by every night on my way to Wawa. You know, there are certain instances, and this board and the statute and case law allows you to give particular weight to people that live within your municipality and where they are in proximity to what's going on. So because of that, this becomes important. We have no guidance as to how to deal with it. We don't want to be liable for somebody putting something on the record that then, God forbid, creates a problem. And you want to be able to continue your business. So how do we do that?
But from a Daniels law perspective, because this is like tangential to.
Correct.
From a
correct.
Daniels law perspective, if the laws are out there, we're gonna strike it, we're not gonna take names, we're not gonna do that. This is just for the rest of us that says, hey, wait a minute, I want my family protected. I'm gonna-
Not necessarily, this falls in Daniel's law.
No, because Daniel's law, there is no obligation on the part of a municipality to redact or remove unless you are first registered. This is how I've read it. This is
Right,
how other people have
right.
interpreted it. You've registered.
Right,
And again, in some instances, according to the law, 30 days after or immediate. But this is different. This is not something you are publishing. This is something that someone is coming up to give you testimony in either support of an application or not. So you may be able to say, or you may want to say that I am someone that is covered under Daniel's law. However, I don't want to tell you in public where I live, but where I live is important because I want you to take that into account when you're approving or denying this application. So again, how do we do that?
So the idea would be that we continue to ask people to state their name and address for the record. If they choose to decline, they
Yes,
sign this piece of paper.
correct.
And if they
Correct.
refuse to sign this, they don't get to comment or ask questions. And if they also refuse to provide their address.
Well, I think then if they refuse to provide their address, then the statement must be that the board reserves the rights to give as much or as little weight to your testimony as possible without the provision of your address or the signing of this document.
I feel like this is more of like a Miranda warning rather than, like, by not giving us their address, they are waiving those rights, whether or not they know.
And
I mean-
that's a good analogy. And the reality of it is too, you may get people, and I'm not mentioning any names, but may wanna come up and sign this that do not live within 200 feet, that are not on. You know what I'm saying, they are not on Daniel's Law, they've just decided to not give you.
But
their
we
address.
need this because of our provision from, which we haven't seen the document yet, to go affirm it, the rules of citizen input. The rules of citizen input say you must give your name and
Correct.
address, right?
Right,
So-
so all of that was drafted prior to Daniel's.
Right, so the thing is, on this, I don't know, it's a lot of paperwork for me to always, but I look at this not necessarily, I look at it for exactly the reasons you're saying. For the board's consideration in a vote, but I also look at it for when you're looking back in the records. And you're looking back to see why a variance was denied 25 years ago, not one person was here. And you read the testimony and you say, oh, I get it, look at all these neighbors that came out. If I see this, it's going to say. Somebody named Todd said something, but they signed this document, and reading it 25 years later, I'm gonna be like, yeah, well, there's no way 25 years later. But because we were researching why variances weren't granted or were granted literally a quarter of a century ago to try to figure out what happened. So this goes into the record of documentation of somebody that might have to review this in literally.
But I
So
think
then
we need
what-
something like this.
Right, but it does, it's just a lot of paperwork for me, but I don't know how else to get it.
It's part of the record, I mean.
But
it's-
then what also helps if someone says, I'm not giving you my address, that those minutes you're looking at from 25 years ago are gonna be no different than if they got this document.
No, but 25 years ago, we didn't have the same fears, right, as a society. of
No, I get it,
addresses.
but what I'm saying is.
But you did read things 25 years ago, excuse me, that did not have full names and addresses.
Correct.
And I don't know, again, there were names that I thought I knew everybody from 25 years ago. I'm like, I have no idea who that person is.
I guess what I'm saying is, if someone just declines to give their address and we don't have this here. Your analysis of why you denied something is gonna be exactly the same, because you're not gonna have the address.
The concern is that the state law tells us as a board to weigh differently
Yeah.
the testimony given by proximate property owners, folks in town, folks outside of town.
You know, and.
And so we have to know how to weigh it based on who's
I get you.
proximate, like, you know, clearly, you know, if my next door neighbor is making a ruckus and there's a noise question,
Mhm.
you know, the board should consider my testimony with more weight
Yes.
than if it's, you know, Brian's who's across the street, right?
And what it may help also, and we're stretching, but we've been doing a lot of that tonight just to kind of think this through. You get somebody that wants to appeal it. And they go to that court and they say, I live right next door, and now all of a sudden their address doesn't matter. Because now all of a sudden you approve something that they did not want. So now they're saying this, you say, Judge. They wouldn't give it to us. And in fact, we asked and they said they wouldn't, and they refused to sign, or whatever the case may be, or they knew right off the bat by signing this, that this was the way it was gonna be given. Yeah, I mean, nothing is perfect. I wish when they did this legislation, they thought of that, but they didn't.
The governing body's easier, we've already said, it's governing
It
body,
is.
they don't have to ask Don,
Right.
whatever, but
This is the difference.
this is different because we have to give weight to testimony.
And you can't just say, we're not gonna give any weight to it, because that doesn't work either.
No, I think it'd be inappropriate it would be unfair to residents who put their addresses on the record and say, I live next door and I need you to take what I say very seriously about X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
We owe them that.
Yeah.
If this is a way to get there,
I mean, like, I think we had talked last time, I was thinking about having the 200 foot list in front of me, and somebody comes up and I say, all right, they're on the 200 foot list or they're not, but then how much protection is that?
It's not,
It's not, it doesn't help, exactly, so
I think it should be left to them to say, I'm gonna sign this form. But I live within 200 feet and the board's gonna do with that information what they will. You know, but I think it should be up to them to disclose it. I mean, certainly somebody could make the connection. or review
That's
the
what I'm saying,
plan,
of course
But
you
it's
can.
about not opening it easier.
well, you can't review plans because presumably that's got to be redacted from the plans.
Well, no, but that's only if you're on Daniel's Law.
Yes,
But
correct.
if it's just a local that just doesn't feel the desire to give their address. I'm saying at that point, somebody could go ahead and do the cross check and do it well.
Somebody asked a question one day, and I don't don't expect to have a big discussion about it, I just wanted, I'm interested to see what the borough's been doing. If addresses need to be redacted from things including tax records, and somebody comes in and asks for a 200-foot list for notice purposes. Like, is that provided, is that not provided, is there address provided but not the name?
Yes.
So that's how you're doing it?
Yeah.
It's addresses
Okay.
without name, but it's
Okay.
just like, so stupid because it's still a red flag.
Yeah.
There's
Like-
somebody,
With no name.
right,
Correct.
right now, you automatically know it's either a police officer or a judge.
Yeah.
Because there's no one else.
Right now, that's it, right, and then in the near future, the legislature is gonna put elected officials into that, so you're gonna always know it's somebody.
Okay, I was curious.
I thought it was gonna, I thought everyone was a current resident.
Oh, maybe this was the legislature.
I
I don't
thought
know.
that's what the recommendation was. or-
They- but that's not what's happening right now.
I mean, I thought that's what just
Put them
clear.
all down as current resident.
I know Michael says.
I like that.
That's what they were going to actually
It's not-
Yeah.
Property owner.
Yes, something like that. I believe that's maybe, and I apologize, I might not have heard it from Michael, I might have heard it from that seminar from the,
No.
you know, from the clerk's
To the list.
comments, but
So
I think that's how they were thinking of doing it.
That's a fabulous idea.
So can I ask the question that I asked last time when we talked about this, about renters?
Oh, yeah.
So the notification list goes to property owners, because that's the statute. And I'm a renter and I have rights and I'm a judge and I've registered, time has elapsed, it's all, and I'm choosing not to participate. How do we handle someone giving testimony? I mean, this form takes care of that, right? Someone, right, if I'm a renter and I'm choosing not to put my address out there. I'm signing this, but that person has to then by trading off not acknowledging that they are within 200 feet publicly, that they are then, we have to weigh or not weigh their testimony, is what this piece of paper does.
Yeah. And I'm missing the reason why.
I'm just
being a
concerned-
renter versus a property owner.
Because renters aren't gonna be on the tax list, renters aren't gonna be on the 200-foot notice list.
But the consequence is the same.
If we need to weigh testimony by folks who are proximate to a property in question. Someone who's a renter is covered by Daniel's law, but but they're not necessarily on that,
Entitled to a 200-foot notice,
yeah,
because it's just the owner.
right. Does that, I mean, I mean, that kind of.
I don't look at it as any different. They found out some way, they're here and they're choosing not to put their address. That's why I don't think.
It doesn't make a
So
difference,
the
yeah, that's
property
true.
would have their name on it because it would have a property owner's
Property
name,
was on it.
and then they just.
And if
build
they're
a store
choosing not to put their name down, that's their.
That's their choice.
That's their choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, they either can protect it, both ways are.
Okay. So Kara, do you need us to formally adopt this as being what we want to use, this piece of paper?
Yes, and I think that I did not get, unless I missed them, and my apologies if I did, comments to the rules on citizen input. Did I get any from anyone?
No, I didn't see it.
I didn't see-
Would we add this to the rules of?
That's what I'm
citizen
thinking, if
Because
we should
I think
reference
that-
it therein.
No.
Okay,
Where
Alright,
does, where does the Zoom list that where does that fit in? Where does that?
the Zoom is on this.
I'm gonna look to see where that is.
I know
Alright,
it's
so on there.
online somewhere.
So let's, all right, because I'm looking at the clock
Yeah.
here, so,
I have a quick question that relates to this.
good, good.
So we have a meeting next, of the 27th. Right, sorry, on the 28th,
Yeah.
sorry. And Marcia and I both have to step down from that meeting.
Correct.
Do we have to leave the room?
Yeah,
Okay,
we're confused.
okay,
You're class 1 and 3.
okay, so we don't even have to, okay. I might, okay, great,
And if you're remote, you can just log out.
yes, we can't, but with that, well, that's my point is we can't.
Watch
Yeah,
it?
we
No.
can't watch it either, but we could watch it after the fact.
Yeah.
Sure.
Cause I guess if I have a constituent that's asking me what's going on, I wanna make sure I'm.
You could also tell them,
listening to it
to
after
you could also
that.
tell them to watch,
Yes, of course,
but yes,
you know what I mean, like what happened at the meeting, I'm like, I don't know, I haven't watched it.
I mean,
that's always.
Are they not
You
listening
could-
to them on Zoom?
But you put just the names.
But there's a name.
You see.
And there's
Oh,
the
I see.
chat.
Okay,
Like-
Anonymous, not as anonymous.
Right.
They can be like, oh, here's who's watching.
I just thought that would.
Well,
Yeah.
I could change, I could be remote, and I could change my name to Susan, and you think it was you.
Yeah.
That's why we make people put their cameras on if
Yeah.
they're providing
Right.
testimony.
Yeah.
And we actually do have, if I remember, something in citizen input that says you have to put your real name.
Yeah.
It's in there, but
No offensive names.
Yeah, we put
Yes.
something in there for that.
yeah,
But that's if you want to talk or even if you want to watch.
Then you can, we don't,
Anytime.
we
I
said
don't think
People were starting-
require anybody to like give their name.
we can't have offensive.
No, but we said we had folks that had expletives.
Oh, that's different, but I mean.
That's what we were.
If somebody was going there and as logged in as anonymous, you really can't stop them.
No, but you can, you know, if-
Okay,
Right.
yeah, no, that you can stop.
Yeah, exactly. It's not.
Yeah, no, we were talking about like
Yeah.
offensive name and stuff, yeah. In the early days of Zoom. Okay, so here's what I'd like for us to do then. We are not starting the master plan stuff tonight because it is 9:54. It is ridiculous to start something new late.
sorry that took so long.
No, this is all good.
And
So-
I appreciate all the discussion.
So here's to kind of follow the rules that are in the existing bylaws, if we have to have this 14 days here, so whenever Kara can get the set of rules, whether it's the meeting on the 28th of March, maybe not in 2 weeks, but maybe if it's the meeting after, whatever it is, talk to the subcommittee if you need to do that. Distribute it at a meeting, and then we will vote on it at whatever the next meeting after that is. The master plan subcommittee report. We have a big public hearing at the meeting on the 28th. And I don't think we're gonna have the time to get into it substantively. I think it'd be silly for us to try.
Especially when I won't be there.
Yeah, so I'd rather that not be happening, right? If
And
we-
understand, I
yeah.
think that, yeah.
Didn't we have like 3 weeks that we were gonna into the working on this anyway, so
Yeah.
with the 20, wouldn't that 28th be too soon anyway?
So there was-
Work out a little better.
So
It works out better, it should work out better anyway.
So we can target the first meeting in April, which I believe is April 11th.
Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly.
No, actually, I think it's the 18th,
18th, it is the 18th, that's right, it's the 18th. and-
18th and the 25th due to the holiday.
Okay.
One after the other.
So okay, this makes it even more fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if
I'm not
the
gonna-
bylaws change or not in on the 28th, and it's gonna end up being adopted in May, then that's fine. If the master plan subcommittee can be ready to do a report on the April 18th meeting, which it sounds like there should be no problem with that. Let's plan for that. And I know we're pushing this down the road, but it's okay. This is important, to do it right. And we'll go from there. All right. All right. Good, thank you all. This has been really good tonight. Item 7 on the agenda, audit the bills. Can I get a motion on the bills?
Second gift.
There were no bills.
There we go.
Okay, I'm trying to stop doing.
No, I have to ask for some escrow and I didn't, some bills were just recently submitted, so.
Yeah. Professional reports, the engineer is not here, the traffic engineer is here. Beth, do you have anything?
No, just master plan stuff already discussed.
Okay, Karen, anything else? Nope. Any need to go to executive session? Nope. Can I get a motion to adjourn? All in favor, say aye. Aye. So moved. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for the work.
Right. Right.